Ai mai rai te winga mata waka kata na mana kahi kata na watapue puta noi na hawe whao te motue rere tonu mai ra kata marunga e purangi e ki tēnei hui hui ngā atu. Mai te Rongoā Māori e I tēnei wā mana watia a matariki e. Anei te mihi ki a koutou, koutou kua wehe atu ki te pōwe, ki ngā pai o ngā rangi. Nei rā te mihi aroha ki a koe e puhutu kawa e mena ki tia mai rātou mā. Nei rā te mihi, nei rā te poroporo wāki ki a rātou mā e. Nei rā mātou. Hei miri miri mai, hei rumi rumi mai, te kaupapa o te wae. Whakatau mai rā, whakatau mai rā, whakatau mai rā.
Tēnā rā tātu katoa. Tēnei mihi tuna tēnei kia koutou e mātakitaki mai nei tēnei atu. O noko te mea tutahi me tuku rā, tatahi krakia kia tātu ke pai rā te haere, wa tātu mahi katoa. Anō reira ke ingoe tātu. E te atua kahara wako mātu e ni wopono ngai koropiku atu ni hiraro rā I tō aro I tēnei. E ingoe tu tēnei ki āpai ka mana ki te mai koe ngā kaupapa katoa ka whārikini a muata koutou aro I tēnei rā. Mana ki tiaki ne mai koe I a tātu katoa. Mana ki tia mai koe wa tātu kau mātu, wa tātu kuia, a rātu e noho na roto te paubitanga ngā ngoikoretanga me ngā māuta. E ingoe tu tēnei māuhiki wene taumaha ke runga I a rātu, tukua ka haere runga te rangi Māori, ke kore noho mai ki te tūpino te wairua, te hinengaro me te tino no te taki. E ingoe tu tēnei runga te ingoa I o mātu kore, ake no. Tiara te tupua, tiara te tawhito, tiara te kāhui o ngā tua, tiara ka tāpiri atu ki a tāne, tāne whakapiripiri, tāne te wāne, tāne te waiora, tāne nui ara. He taonga ki te whai ao, he taonga ki te o marama, haungia, huia, taiki. Tēnā rā tātu katoa. Tēnei tua tūna ki te mihi atu kia koutu katoa. Wāti mai ni a mātou runga rā, wa koutou puka mātou runga rā, wa koutou rorohiko. I roto rā I ta tātou kaupapa o te roho. Tēnei kei te mihi atu rā, tēnei kia koutou katoa. E mihi ana, e mihi nui tēnei kia koutou. E mihi rā ki wa tātou mate hina tonu nei, I roto rā I wa tātou tini maraima. Ko tai hoki rātu ki te kāga tūturu mō tēnā mea mō te tangata. Nō reira ka mate kia koutou rā, haere koutou, haere rā koutou. Ka hoki mai no kia tātou rā, te hungo rā tēnei rā, ke te mihi atu rā tēnei kia koutou katoa. I roto rā I tēnei tauhau o tātou o roto o mata ariki, I roto o maturiki. E mihi atu na tēnei kia koutou, ka mea o tērā tau tukua ka haere runga te rangi Māori, ke tīmata I tēnei tauhau, ki roto tēnā, I roto tēnā. Nō reira tēnei ke te mihi atu rā, tēnei kia koutou katoa, runga te ingoa I o matukore ākino. Āmen.
E hara, I te mea nōna nei, te aroha nōna, te pūnai tuku iho, I tuku iho, te mea mana o te iwi nona tuku nai tuku iho I tuku iho tu manako whakapono te mea nui ko te aroha nona tuku nai tuku iho I tuku iho
Anō rira apiti hono tātai ho, te hua mate kia koutou, haere, haere, haere. Apiti hono tātai ho, o tātou rā te humora, tēnā koutou, a kia ora mai no tātou katoa.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ka tahina te timatanga pai mo tō tātou rā ko tēnā. Tēnā koutou e aku kaumātua, mai kore ake koutou e hāngai ana i ngā mea katoa ki tā tātou hui I te rānei. Aha kua kāre tai e tātou te hui a kanohi nei, kei te whakotahi koutou I ngā wairua, koina te mea nui. Tēnā rā koutou katoa, he uri tēnei, no tama te kapua, no tahu pōtiki hoki, ko Stacey Morrison tōku ingoa, no ngaitahu, no te arawa hoki. Mauri ora kia tātou. I was just saying, wasn't that a beautiful start to our day? And our kaumātua, they are so onto it. Bring in the epurangi, bring in the ways that we are all connecting. And even though we can't be together in person, no mai ki taku kouta, welcome to my kitchen. Have a wee look around. I always like that. That's the good thing about Zoom is you can go, ooh, look at that. Oh, I wonder what that is. Kia mōhio mai koutou. On the kaupapa here, I do have my rehu korokoro with me today, and it's probably a good idea that I'm not with you in person. Engari, te wairua ko hikitia. So we're all together in the spirit of this beautiful day, and I hope you can still feel it across your computers. There are lots of ways that we can still interact with each other. Nō reira, kia kaha tātou, let's do that. Please make sure you utilise all of the aspects of our day in terms of how we can connect. So I will tell you a few things about our technical situations today. Kia mōhio mai koutou, just so that you don't have a little bit of a hapa like Stacey has already. So our theme of the day, ne te tuatahi, today we talk about Miria te Rongo, stimulating the senses to reach their potential. And in this session, we are going to inspire, we seek to better understand, to achieve and attain Rongoā Māori. Nō reira, e kare mā ko te tūmanako ia e noho hanea na koutou. I hope that you're now sitting comfortably. And the good thing about this symposium is we can always interact in a way that works for us wherever we are. Nau mai, whakapiri mai, join us all now as we welcome each other into this beautiful space. So in terms of our technical difficulties, nui te āwhina. So we have lots of help available. Please use the live support. So that's the name of the button there, live support. You can access that at the top of your screen. Ki te matau. If you do have any viewing issues because of your internet bandwidth, kei e tahi rua pēr tātou. You know, some of us are not all in the big cities. Me te paihoki o te momo noho. So maybe your internet won't play sometimes, but just click on the audio video issues text that is right below the video and choose one of those backup streams which are a lower latency. I say latency as if I know what that means, but I don't, karema. As long as it helps you, then ka pai, ko te pai ngā tūtera. Closed captions are available in English. Mena ka kōrero Māori e tahi, and if we speak Māori, we will paraphrase what we're saying as well. Tātou ne, he wairua Māori tō tēnei hui, so we're all in this together and can engage as well. So in terms of our closed captions, just click on the CC button, and hopefully that will help. And people like me will try to remember not to speak too quickly so that we can all understand as well. Now, this beautiful virtual Tua Papa, the platform allows opportunities for you to connect with other people, as I said. So we'd love for you to explore the meeting hub during the break, during the day, have a little hotutsu and see who you can catch up with in there. Now, throughout the conference, please put in your pātai, put in your questions into the live Q&A icon. It works really, really well, and we'll answer them during the panel discussions at the end of each session. Mena e ratana e tahi atu ki te pātai, and if others like that question, we can make sure that we show a little tohu on that question. It'll get elevated, and so we can ask it quicker. Nā, kia mōhio mai koutou, ka tīmata tā tātou hui e nei. So we are ready to start. We'll just do a double check, make sure that no one's telling me anything differently. Kei te pai. We are all good to go, and I hope you're excited. How about we chuck some love onto the chat if we're all ready to go and we're all enjoying our day as well. Kia ora tātou, kia ora koutou katoa, aha kua kai here, aha kua kōwai, no matter where you are and how you're joining us today, nau mai whakapiri mai. Nā, ko tā tātou kai kōrero tuatahi, our first speaker today, Rihanna Manuel. Rihanna's previous role was Chief Executive Officer of Hauraki Primary Health Organisation and Te Korowai Hauora o Hauraki. She's invested heavily in developing strategic, visionary leadership within the Māori and health sectors. He wiki nui tēnei mō tātou katoa, a huge week for all of us. Matariki mai, kaupapa Māori mai i te ao hauora. So lots of wonderful things happening. It just feels very appropriate to be starting with you. Nō reira, involved in kaupapa Māori organisations for most of her career, tēnei ka mihi kia koe e te maraikura nau mai whakapiri mai Rihanna Manuel.
Tēnā koutou e te whānau, ka nui te mihi kia koutou i tēnei ata. Ko te tūmanako, ka noho haumaru ia koutou, engari nōku te whiwhi a haramai ana ki te tuku tēnei kōrero kia koutou i te ata nei. Engari, ai, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Mō taku he, kare au I kitea, engari, tai noa. Engari, ko Rihanna Manuel tōku ingoa no pare hauraki a hau. E mihi atu mai tōku maunga o oku maunga o moihau o te aroha, kia koutou katoa. E haerere ana te awa o kākatarahai ki te taha o tōku marae o manaia, I tupua ki au I roto I te awa o manaia, kei reira taku u kai pō. Engari e mihi mai o hā kia koutou katoa. Thank you so much for the opportunity today. And I just really wanted to firstly just start with an introduction. And then I'm going to share some slides with everybody today on this amazing kaupapa. And might I say, it's such a... it's not by accident that we're sitting here having this conversation at this time, Manawa Tia Matariki, where we are not only, you know, in our new year, in our tauhou, but of course we are also now about to launch and go live with the Māori Health Authority and indeed Health New Zealand around the two new entities. So I thought I'd do a bit of a presentation today, and I'm trying not to do too many PowerPoint slides, but they do give me a little bit of an indicator as to where to go with the kōrero. So again, just really wanted to mihi. I forgot to say too, I am from Parehauraki in case you missed it. No Ngāti Pūkenga ki manaia, no Ngāti Kahungunu, Ngāti Maru o Kuiwi, and grew up in a little tiny village called Manaia, and currently live there, still live there, and of course have raised my children and now my grandchildren in said village, and have been very privileged to grow up in a very small, rurally isolated community, surrounded by whānau. And you know, we have two major bastions in our village, our marae, and of course our kura, and now our puna actually. So these are the things that help to whakarauora tō tātou iwi or nokora, and so that's kind of one of the things I'm mindful as we go into this reform. So we'll get started. I'll share the screen because otherwise I'm going to get a bit of a growling about these things. One moment. And if you've got any pātai, then please just ask away. And let's make sure I've got the screen up. So hopefully everybody can see this. And I can't. Oh yeah, kapai. Alrighty, so let's get started. So lots of people are asking about Te Mana Hauora Māori or the Māori Health Authority. And the first thing I would love to say is that as of the 1st of July, there'll be a process to hiki te tapu o ngā ingoa hou. And so we will be moving away from the name of Māori Health Authority and using our new name. The names were part of a wānanga that were taken by our Mātanga Reo group, and of course they've come up with the ingoa that will be gifted to both ourselves and to Hauora Aotearoa or Health New Zealand moving forward. And I for one can't wait for that. So without providing spoiler alerts, just be mindful that that process will be part of day one launch as well, is to receive those gifted names. And I'm also really mindful that when you receive a gift like it, it's a taonga tuku iho, and so you've got to be careful and really take care and manaki those names, and that's certainly our intention. Ka I just want to note too, that when you, as we start, as we get ready to launch day one, there is this deep desire to honour those who led the way. The genesis for a Māori Health Authority has a very long history, and it certainly doesn't start with day one, if you like, as we've come to know it. And of course, it stands upon the shoulders of many rangatira who have gone before us. And I won't get into naming all of those rangatira, but for each of us around the motu who will understand and be really aware of those people, you know who I'm talking about in terms of this. Ka pai. The other thing that I'd love to draw to people's attention, and of course everything's draft whānau until we get to day one, but we're a people who build our. We have a deep sense of esoteric knowledge. We are a people who have pūrākau that have guided us as we've gone along on this journey, and so tō tātou waka haurua is a conversation that we've been having as we start moving towards what we describe as Paitawhiti, our destination. The reason why we chose, and I know that people are probably thinking everybody's looked at a waka haurua journey, and I think initially we thought about it that you could have Health New Zealand in one hull and the Māori Health Authority in another hull, and then band us together to move on this journey. However, when I started to have discussions with some of our tohunga around this area, and specifically Hoturo Kur, he reminded me that actually it is a fleet that's required on this journey, because health is, but one component. There are many other factors that, many other people who will be on this journey with us, including Health New Zealand. And so what you see in front of you is kind of like a bit of the storybook version, whereby we acknowledge that we are a waka. There is a fleet of us that will be on this. There is a destination that we are setting ourselves toward, and then all of the elements that will influence and guide us as we go. And that's everything from ngā tohu o te pō, ngā tohu o te rā, our moana, and so on. Te hau, which of course will be that, the elements that fill our winds, all of the atua that ride into this, and so on and so forth. So that's just to give you a really brief idea of where that kind of metaphor comes from. So we're part of a fleet. We know where our destination is. It's oranga whānau, or we describe it as paitawhiti. There will be some places that we need to, or some po that we set as we go along on this journey to let us know that we are reaching, we are moving toward the destination and not just, not just sitting still. And as Hotu reminded us too, that, sometimes you'll encounter storms. Sometimes there will be elements that will seek to, to slow the journey down, and you've got to make really, really good decisions about how you move forward with that. So te paitawhiti, or our vision, is whakahikot I te oranga whānau. Our vision serves as a destination for our wakahaurua. There are many, we acknowledge that there are many different ways, that different conditions that will influence, as I said. And of course, our whakatauki that will underpin this is e kore tēnei oranga e huri ki tua o aku mokopuna. Our mokopuna shall inherit a better place than I inherited. It's key that we've got to be able to create change and enable change, and make sure that we lay down the right ara or tuapapa for our babies to come. Some of the things that we think about inside the Māori Health Authority are, what are those levers for change that we'll see inside, see inside these reforms. So, the Crown and Māori relations, ensuring te tiriti is embedded. Te tiriti is one of those key, the key areas that is guiding this whole reform. Partnership with our Health New Zealand whānau, partnership with iwi Māori partnership boards, and of course partnership with all of the other sectors for change, because we acknowledge that health is kind of this place we find ourselves, but we have our kaupapa Māori providers, we have housing, education, justice. There are a whole range of other sectors who actually will be able to impact on the well-being of our people in a way that we need to partner up in those spaces and make sure that we're all moving together. Of course, there's always going to be strategy, policy, the commissioning that happens directly, co-commissioning with Health New Zealand, partnered commissioning, as I said, with other sectors, the New Zealand Health Plan that will be developed, whānau experience, voice and engagement, essential to make sure that we know and we're guided by where we need to go, developing up our workforce, making sure that we have systems, intelligence, and monitoring. So, not just collection of data, but what do we do with the data when we've collected it? And te ao Māori innovation. And that's the kind of thing that I wanted to talk more about today, because, of course, te ao Māori innovation is all about recognizing our own esoteric knowledge. It's about bringing forward our solutions and making sure that we move in those spaces for the future. So, some of the things that are important to us. Obviously, that our whānau are better off as a result of the reform. We can't have gone through all of this and not have seen that they have the improvements or the change that is required to bring about oranga whānau. That whānau become the direction setters for themselves. That this whole process must be whānau centered. Whānau voice must inform where we go, what we do, and how we do it. That we look at things from a strength-based model, not deficit. So it's not the absence of disease that we're chasing, it is the presence of well-being for our whānau. That the whole system has an accountability. So this is not about the Māori Health Authority having to do all of the work. It is about us making sure that those who are funded, those who are responsible for the change, those who need to provide more equitable outcomes and show te tiriti partnerships, that the whole system is accountable to that. Our outcomes are not just outputs or inputs. It's not just counting widgets, FTEs, but actually, what does well-being look like, and how do we describe that? How do our iwi describe it? How do our hapu describe it? How do our hapori describe it? Those are the kind of outcomes that we're really interested in. Everywhere I've gone over the past 3 months, what I come away from each time is our communities, our people. They have aspirations that they want to see in their communities for their people. They want to work with us to make sure that we enable those spaces. systems and services that are enablers, so it's no use us creating a whole bunch of things that won't be useful to a community way out there in the middle of Hauraki, where they are rural, isolated, and don't have access to the same things as, say, our whānau that might be living in a more urban setting. So we understand that the systems and service enablers need to be accountable across all of those places. Frequency and quality of oranga data, as I said before, we've long all collected data. In fact, there are many, many ways that data is being collected on our behalf. It's what we use, the intelligence and the health analytics and the intelligence that we use around that data. That's the really important stuff. What does it tell us about what are the highest needs for those communities, for that hapori, for that iwi, for that hapu? And then how do we join together with all the different sectors, with our partners, with our iwi Māori partnership boards to really make a difference in those spaces. And of course, recognising Te Ao Māori as a feature, not just a feature, but as a driving force for where we want to go moving forward. Using our esoteric knowledge, returning to the things that were legislated away from us, or taken, or stolen, or confiscated from us over this last 182 years. And I just have to acknowledge that, it's taken us 182 years to get here, but it cannot take us that long before we turn this waka around. So just to note a couple of things. By now, you'll all know that we are the two new CEs, if you like, of our organisations. Myself as the interim CEO for the Māori Health Authority, and just Whepuala Lea Margie Apa. Just want to acknowledge Margie as my co-CEO. I take heart from the fact that Margie and I have similar value systems. We are working conscientiously together to make sure that we really, across the two organisations, are driving for equitable outcome for our people. We will monitor. So remember that the Māori Health Authority is not just a commissioner. It is not just an entity that will help develop policy, but it is also required to monitor across the Health New Zealand network to make sure that equitable outcome, te tiriti partnerships, that we can visibly see that these things are being done, that there is an accountability framework for those, and that we will measure. But I also always want to make clear too that monitoring is one thing, and then we get in there and we work together collectively, collaboratively to make sure we make those changes required. So just a quick word here about the Māori Health organisational structure. So if you haven't seen it before, I am not a huge fan of wiring diagrams. And so when I started thinking about our voyage, if you like, over the moana to Te Pai Tawhiti, I started to think about how might a structure look differently, and had a discussion with one of our creatives, and talked to him about if I had to have a structure that was more coherent with our stories, with our esoteric knowledge, what might it look like? And the suggestion came back to utilize a 16-point wind compass. And I thought to myself, of course, that's exactly what I require for this journey. And it is a navigational tool, and so it makes sense that it would form up our structure. So really just wanted to introduce you to this concept that on the outer portofita, you see all the notches, which are indicative of kairo. These are also representative of whānau, the many whānau that will join us on this journey. So this is what we note as te akatari, or corporate services. And then you have the inside, the porofita just inside, and of course that porofita is acknowledging two specific tohu, mangopare and our manu, and those two are key tohu when you're on a journey that is seaward bound. Manu are often indicators of land nearby, and of course the mangopare, or our kaitiaki, are often warning or guides kaitiaki on our journey as well. So for that reason, they cover off te akatoakiaki, which is our governance and advisory, to help provide that guidance and tohu around services. And then on the inner, the black and white tohu, which is the high Pakati design, which is also directional. It often is a directional tohu, but it also is a tohu around the pātu wata. So these are the things that we'll have in place to help, create guidance and safety and protect. They are the protectors of these kind of spaces, such as te aka whakamua, which is system and strategy transformation. So what is it that we're going to be doing moving forward? Te aka tūkanga, which is our system policy, and of course te aka taupiringa, which is the service development and relations. And the final tohu, which you might be hard to see, but right inside is a whare nui, and you'll see some other shapes and tohu all around. Those are indicative of our awa, our moana, and our maunga. But the whare is the place that we land. When we come to land and we reach Paitawhiti, then we come into our whare. We look to our tāhuhu of the whare down into the po, which which is how we transform that information from our atua down through the tāhuhu, through our po, to the whenua and to our people. And that is a indicator of Paitawhiti. So welcome to the structure of the Māori Health Authority. But if you are a person who likes to have the visual of a wiring diagram, then it kind of looks like this. And the one that I wanted to kind of talk a little bit more to today, and I'm hoping this works, is our maiaka mātauranga. So in my structure, you'll note that there is the maiaka mātauranga Māori, and inside there will be the leadership and a whole kāhui of people who will be responsible for te reo, for kawa, for tikanga, for rongoā, and of course for te tiriti LORE/LAW. And that kind of is a key position from my point of view, because in this structure, it is how we're going to move toward a better implementation, stronger guidance, and of course moving toward that conversation of well-being for our people. Okay, so I think that is the last. Okay. That's the end of the slideshow, whānau. So I'm just going to stop sharing, and I hope I do this right, because I've had so many hits and misses with this. So I apologise to the poor. There we go. Stop share. I did listen. So that ends the presentation part of it, and of course, I'm really happy to take any questions, which I think will come up in the Q&A session. But I'm just having a quick look whilst we've got time to see if there's anything that I need to answer that's pressing. Oh, kapai. So I've just had a little word to say that we'll answer those at the end. So as we just a few other things to note, as I pointed out, Rongoā is going to be one of those key functions that we get very serious about. Budget 21, we made a direct decision to say, actually, we need more rongoā contracts out there. There are some communities who had no access to services, and so we, before we even got to day one, that was a kind of an intentional thing to say, yep, this is where we're going to invest, and that intention will continue forward into budget 22, whānau. We need to develop a workforce. We need to develop more services. We need to make sure that we develop health literacy for our people around what is rongoā. Like, it's like many things through colonization. We've lost so much over time. Our land, our esoteric knowledge, our language, our healing strategies like rongoā. And these are things that our people have to be reintroduced to. And so it's going to be something that we're going to have to work collaboratively with. And it's probably one of the things that I am looking forward to most, is reintroducing our people to ourselves, our very sense of being. And I know that everybody is on a different journey at this stage. And I'm a generation of people who have had to go back to kura to reclaim our reo, to reclaim our own esoteric knowledge pieces, and then made a very determined decision that my children and grandchildren would be raised as first language speakers. That's a journey of some 20, 30 years. And it takes an immense amount of time. So I appreciate that everybody is in a different space at this time. But that's some of the things that we can do as the Māori Health Authority, is bring these things back into the light. Tēnei te pō no mai te ao. So if we start to develop the knowledge set, we start to develop more services, work in collaboration with our kaupapa Māori providers to make sure that they have the ability to stand up these services, work toward well-being, creating well-being spaces for our people and creating understanding of how to use rongoā. I was so thrilled, like of all the things I've received lately, our Hauora Rongoā kits have been phenomenal. And not only are they, not only were they a gift in terms of well-being, but they also talk to how we can actually do these things for ourselves, given the right guidance and obviously the right opportunity to learn. So there are so many opportunities, and it's certainly something that we're going to be working collectively and very diligently around. I've also seen examples where in our own hospitals we've seen the partnership of rongoā. So I went to Hokianga Hauora and saw how in their inpatient settings they are using rongoā side by side with our other Western models of medicine, and again, just great opportunities. So the thing we've got to do now is take all of those great innovations, those great learnings, those great opportunities, and just flood it throughout Aotearoa whānau. So there you go. That's probably as much as I have to say. We've got day one launch on Friday whānau. I'm super excited about that because that's when we officially launch off as a kaupapa. As I said before, there'll be a live feed from Waitangi around the hiki te tapu of our ingoa at dawn, and then of course the Minister Little and Minister Henare will launch the entities formally down here in Manukau. So and again, all live feed. Aroha mai, we'd love to have these really big events, but with COVID, with respiratory illnesses on the rise, it is about protecting our whānau. So going virtual as we have done today will be the order of the day, and those we'll make sure that people get those connections. And if you haven't got the live feed connection, do send it on our webpage, the Māori Health Authority webpage. You'll see an email. Do send us an email. We'll make sure that we send that out. There you go. Oh, okay. So I've just got but I'm just reading a feed here. Sorry, I'm not too sure which question. I can see a chat that I'm to answer a question, but I'm not too sure what the question is. Oh, yes, Stacey might be going to ask me that live. So I'll kei a koe te rākau e te rangatira, engari kia koutou katoa, mo tō koutou whakarongo, mo tō koutou tautoko o tēnei kaupapa, mauri ora e te whare.
Tēnei ka mihi ki a koe e te mārei kura, ka tau te wairu e te mōhio ko korua tahi ka arahi a tātou. Ko korua kai te kai o tēnei waka hourua. I was hoping for a bit of a scoop. Want to tell us the name before anybody else? You're tempted, aren't you?
I'm so tempted, but I'm also driven by tikanga. And Stacey, I know that you will know this. That korohere ngāpō will slap my little hands if I don't follow the protocol of letting the hiki o te tapu of the ingoa get lifted, and then we'll be there. But you know what? 1st of July, whānau, be there, and you will hear it firsthand from Waitangi.
Okay, well, kāre e roa, so we can wait for that long. I just, FYI, I'm not scared of korohere, hoi anō. Engari, you are running to Māori time, extremely efficient. And because we have a little bit more time, how about we do go to the pressing questions? One of them coming from Amo here. Would it be okay to have those slides that you presented to us today?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I will. I will send those out. There's nothing to hide there. They're just kind of the things that we've gotten together so far. So very happy to share those.
Tēnā koe. Ko te pātai ia, I think the question that's come up a lot, and because we have a little bit of time, we'd like to take the opportunity to ask, but remember we will have the Q&A after our 3 kai kōrero. And this is from Manu, just asking if the whole system accountability, which you talked about is central, are regulatory responses for medicines and rongoā are likely to be within the mandate of the new entity. So you did speak to this a little bit, but when I guess Manu's saying when it looks like it's mostly strategy, policy, and services focused, can you just talk to us a little bit more about regulatory responsibilities for medicines and rongoā within the mandate of the new insert name here?
Yes, so with if I think about Pharmac, for instance, one of the new entities who will come up under Health New Zealand. So I think everybody's quite aware now that there are the 20 DHBs coming together to form one national health system, but as well as that are the 10 additional entities such as Pharmac. So there will be monitoring in those spaces from our point of view, and it's an important function because often, if we're monitoring for equitable outcome, often there is a criticism and a concern that if that we don't have access to things in the same way that other people do, that there is bias, that there are concerns around institutional racism, so that's why the monitoring function is a major lever, because we have to be able to get in there and see, well, actually, let's look at the data, let's perform some analytics around this, and what does it tell us? Because there's, we can all say that we don't have that bias, we don't perform in that way, and most of our clinicians would say that. But in the same light, the data tells us otherwise. And so, yes, there will be monitoring in those functions. As to rongoā, it is a little bit different in that that doesn't sit necessarily in with Health New Zealand. That will be something that the Māori Health Authority will both fund and work collaboratively with all of our providers and those, because I'm mindful, a lot of the kōrero I get often is, actually, we don't, rongoā providers themselves will say, we don't belong to a kaupapa Māori provider. We're not employed by anybody. We're our own rongoā provider, if you like, and we just work in our communities just because we can. So monitoring in those spaces is going to be something that has to be looked at over time to make sure that the framework isn't something that becomes, a roadblock for those providers who have been doing what they're doing for ages. All our nannies, who had those kind of the rongoā and the communities who do those kind of things just because. Whereas something we're talking about is funding providers and funding workforce to be trained, etc. So it will look different in that space, if that helps.
E mōhio pai ana koe ki ngā tukinga, you understand the challenges of that, but I guess if I listen to what you just said about tikanga, tikanga is a form of our self-monitoring, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Nō reira, aku whakatoa e whakai au ki tau mō korohere, te mana me te mauri o ngā ingoa, kua takoha ngia kia koutou. So we understand that tikanga is our own way of monitoring, it's just a better sounding word.
Absolutely, and hence the reason why there has to be the, in my structure, there's a deputy chief executive role for Mātauranga Māori, because it's exactly that conversation. And I think one of the kāhui, part of the kāhui will be that LORE/LAW stuff, because often that's exactly what forms up the framework for monitoring for us. So we want to use tikanga and kawa as our guides often, to say this is how we're going to measure and monitor ourselves against our own our own esoteric knowledge, our own development, and to make sure we're accountable back to our people. But then there's this other part, the LAW, that will often try and get in our way to become that roadblock. So it's making sure that we, as the Māori Health Authority, are really clear about how that looks and how we will manage that process going forward.
Tēnā koe. And as you have described with your understanding of tikanga, of mātauranga, ngā here katoa, everything that binds us, they're different forms of, what we answer to first. But I understand that your situation is different and you're on this wakahourua. No reira, kia kaha koe. Because just one last question from Glennis. How is that MHA different, or the Māori Health Authority different from both health and Māori organisations that are currently in place?
Okay, so I'm not sure whether they, so Māori Health Authority, and I'm not sure that this is going to answer it because I'm not too sure what we're measuring when we ask the other Māori organisations that are in place. So one of the things that I think is very different is that in the public service sector, because one of the things we have to be clear is that the Māori Health Authority is a Crown entity. And as of the 1st of July, that becomes under legislation. That's how we will rise up. But in the public service sector, we haven't seen the development of a partner or a partnership kind of model, which is Health New Zealand and the Māori Health Authority side by side. I've not seen that. If you look around the different public service sectors, you'll often have a directorate or you'll have some kind of entity within a public service sector, but you'll seldom see them as partners in that space. And so I think that's one of the key differences here in terms of what Māori Health Authority does. As I said before, the Māori Health Authority also has some really distinct roles. We will be policy setters, and that means, so if you think about health in its totality, the Ministry of Health is going to become the policy steward. So they are the kaitiaki around policy, but so will be, we will partner up with the Ministry of Health to provide policy oversight. So that's one part. Then there is the commissioning functions that we as a Māori Health Authority, so all contracting for Māori health providers, for instance, and all of the new contracting around innovation, around workforce development for Māori, that will come through the Māori Health Authority. So we'll be commissioners in that instance. And then the third part is that we are a co-commissioner with Health New Zealand. So we're there. So this is that argument around, well, hang about, Health New Zealand's got all the money. But that's a partnership, again, role that we have. Our job is to get in there and get that money out for our people, because that money is as much ours as a population and as a people, and with equity as the lens that governs their behaviour. That's how we get in there and make sure that equitable outcome comes out for our people. So that's some of the things that are very different. In terms of, from my view. So yep, first time I've ever seen it. I've been in health now about 30 odd years, which is, makes me kind of a baby in the scheme of things, really, doesn't it? And I've seen all manner of different arrangements. I've been a Māori Health GM, so I understand the notion of being a directorate or a seat at the table. But this time we have a table that sits alongside their table. It's up to us to make sure now that we get everything we need, all the kai that we need to be on our table, and we do it as fast as possible, because we can't dilly-dally. And whānau, if I can give you one last reassurance, it's that, if there's one thing about being a child of a village, is you learn very early, from a very early age, how to work hard and what your responsibility back to people are. So that's something I take forward with me. And one last whakaaro, e harataku toi te tōtaki tahi ko te takitini care. This is not a ride just for the Māori Health Authority whānau. We've all got to be here for this. We've all got to come together collectively, collaboratively. And I know that's been a difficult space for us all over these many years. of trying to move ourselves from being colonized people to decolonizing ourselves. It will not be an easy shift. And I see it everywhere I go in education. 85% of our children are still being taught in kura auraki. In health, 85% of our people are receiving their services from mainstream services. It goes on and on and on, and that's because we're on a journey, whānau. And so, I'm acknowledging right here and now that the hull of Hauora is dug very, very deep. It has taken 182 years for that waka to get as deeply dug as it is. So that means we can't backfill the waka. It just won't work like that. But what we can do is put all our hands on those hoi collectively, collaboratively together, and I reckon we'll turn that waka around. I know we will.
Tēnā koe. Ka mutu, kua whai te ia wai, hei kōkiri te iwi. We're on a good current. Yeah?
Yes, tika.
Nō reira, e mihi ana ki a koe te kai hautū mō tēnei wā, ka tau wā tāua kōrero. So we will look forward to the Q&A, which I think could probably take up all of the day if you wish. We will keep control here. Ka tau, ka manawa nui tātou. But thank you for starting our day in a way that's opening our minds to, so many aspects of this discussion. The whānuitanga o tēnei kaupapa koi. Ko koe tērā e arahi ana I tēnei kaupapa ahakoa te ahua o te moana tā puke, ko koe tonu kei te kai o te waka. Tēnei ka mihi kia te maraikura no tēnei wā. Kia ora. Tēnā tātou. So, look at us. We're on time. We're moving ahead. We have lots of different kōrero to share with you. Just in terms of our questions, what I'm noticing is that people are putting it in the discussion forum. Kei te pai tēnā, that's okay. But in terms of our live Q&A, which we will have after our three speakers, they will all need to go into the live Q&A at that point. So I'll look for any extra points from our team, our systems team, to say, where should people put their questions? Should it be the live Q&A? More than the discussion forum, but we will sort that out so that we do answer your pātai, because your pātai are fantastic, and this is our opportunity to hui together, and one of the benefits of being online. Nō reira, kia kaha tātou. And if you'd like to have a little look around the room, so to speak, you just click on attendees and sponsors, and then we're all in alphabetical order, so you get, kei konei a mea, kei konei a mea. So kia kaha tātou ki te whakamahinga rauimi o te wā. We can use all of the resources in front of us. Engari, te kai kōrero e whai ake nei, nau mai, haere mai, whakapiri mai, Auden paia, no Ngāti Kahungunu, ngō Ngāpuhi, no Ngāti Paraupuki. Auden joined ACC in 2018 as a commercial manager in the procurement team. In 2020, he took on his current role managing the newly created Māori Health team. Focus on commissioning services that will improve access, experience, and also outcomes for whānau Māori, and also to increase the opportunities for Māori health providers. Nō reira, tēnā koe, I tō hono mai ki tēnei kaupapa nui o tātou, nau mai whakapiri mai, Auden Paia. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā tātou e te whānau, manawa tia matariki, e te kai karanga, mihi mai karanga mai, e te pā whakawairoa, matua Ashby, tēnā koe, e te kai whakahaere o tō tā. Tēnei te mihi ki a koe, Stacey. Mihi nui e te rangatira Rihanna mō tō kōrero I tēnei ata. Engari me tino mihi ki ngā ringa mirimiri, ngā kai mahi rongoā o te motu, ngā kai takutaku o te ahi. Tēnā koutou. O ti rā ki a tātou katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou. Ko aura pai tuku ingoa, as Stacey's mentioned, he uri ahau no Ngāpuhi, no Ngāti Parau, no Ngāti Kahungunu. My role is Māori Health Manager. Its primary focus is to improve equitable access, experience and outcomes for Māori. I have what I would consider 4 nuhaka tamariki, and today is a special day for my whānau. It's because it's my wedding anniversary. So what better way to enjoy the day with the Rongoā Symposium. 20 years is how long we've been married, and I know you're surprised at that. I was reminded of it last night. So, but it's an honour and a privilege to speak to you all about the journey of Rongoā Māori within ACC. Rongoā and myself had something in common. We both started, for me in this role, and for Rongoā embedded in ACC together, but for separate reasons. As we are aware, the journey of Rongoā from the Tohunga Suppressions Act in 1907, from that outlawed Rongoā Māori from being practiced, to that being repealed in 1962, to today, with Rongoā being available to ACC clients, or kiritake is what we call them, which really needs to be celebrated and continue to be celebrated. The journey for myself has some similarities. My whakapapa of colonisation, outlawed being Māori outside of the home. And I can remember all my grandparents speaking of times where they got whippings for just being Māori in their school. And we look back at, up to the marches of land and language in the 70s, and also the revival of Te Ao Māori in the 80s until today. We're here now, we have Māori within ACC leading and supporting it internally. And again, this is something that we should continue to celebrate and, to be very thankful for. And, ngā mihi ki tō tātou tipuna kua pare I te huarahi. It's really good to acknowledge those that have really fought for this and have paved the way for people like ourselves to be able to enable Rongoā. But my journey in ACC has not always been good. When I first started in ACC, I did announce this to my whānau, and their responses were, why would you work for them? Or others would say, I hate ACC. It's not really a good start when you're working for an organisation and your whānau are not really proud of the organisation that you work for. But as I began my time in ACC, I got to spend time with the leaders, the people within ACC, and all I can say is, from my lens, the majority of leaders are really serious in wanting to help and wanting to help Māori. So, but when I asked my whānau why do you not like ACC? What I did notice, though, is that not all of them understood what ACC is all about. So today, whānau, I'm going to spend a little bit of time just sharing with you all about what ACC is all about. And also for those listening and curious on whether ACC is serious about Rongoā, I'm going to give you 5 reasons why. For those that are listening today and are curious about whether Rongoā has any benefits to ACC kiritaki, I want to share a good summary. In fact, I could spend the whole half an hour talking about the benefits. But just to be also transparent, this journey has come with challenges that we'll highlight today. And then I'll give a bit of an update on, sort of what's happening next. So just a little bit about ACC whānau, just so we're all clear. Everyone in Aotearoa is covered by ACC's no-fault scheme if they're injured in an accident. And our role is to get you better. If you have an accident that causes an injury, the cover we provide helps pay for costs of recovery and treatment, and this includes help at home, work, and even income. Now, just to sort of cement this, I just want to share two stories. One happened to myself. Many moons ago, I was playing rugby. Why? Because rugby is part of well-being, and it's an important part of someone's lifestyle. And in fact, I truly believe if we ever get to heaven, there'll be a rugby field there. But anyway, I tore a ligament, and it was an injury from an accident, and I was covered. And I got to see that, doctor, surgery, rehab, and compensation all the way up to when I was able to get back to playing rugby and also getting back to work. Now, if I was to just change this a bit, if for another story, if say fried bread was your vice and butter and golden syrup is kind of what you turn to for comfort each day, eventually you may experience some health issues, high blood pressure, diabetes, and other things. Please contact Rihanna, who spoke just before, or John Whanga, who's going to speak later. This is not the lane that ACC's legislative framework works under. You, my friend, you need to call Ministry of Health, Health New Zealand, or the Māori Health Authority for support. But for the purpose of this kōrero, we're here to help you get better when you have an injury. But we do this by reaching out to our service providers, who either create programs to prevent injuries or to help with the treatment and rehabilitation of our kiritaki. Now, in the past, ACC had always turned to Western health methodologies and medicine to help us achieve that goal. But that goal has always been achieved. We've noticed some real failures that I'll highlight today. And we've recently turned to Mai Rongoā Māori to help address some of these concerns. And one such example is enabling rongoā. So I want to share with you sort of 5 reasons. This is not in any particular order. First, takes us back to 2017 when ACC launched a new strategy called Whai Te Tika, or Pursue What Is Right. This was to reduce inequities by committing to improving equity of access, experience, and outcomes for Māori. This is the strategy for which has grown several Māori-centric initiatives at ACC. My role is a good example. This was created only 2 years ago, and I took on this role to help. I've noticed in that time we've had now board members that have Mai Rongoā Māori. We've now got a number of executive leaders that are present and also joining ACC that are also Māori. We have leaders dotted within the organisation now that are Māori, all for the purpose of wanting to help. The second reason is, and links to our strategy, but it's all about embedding te tiriti o Waitangi principles into our mahi. Tino rangatirotanga, partnership, active prediction, equity, you always forget the rest, options. ACC is committed to these principles, and are used as a guide to help us improve our services. Third reason is our data is telling us we have some serious concerns. Māori are 2.5 times more likely to sustain serious injuries. Now, the bulk of them are usually traumatic brain injuries or spinal cord injuries. Now, 70% of those are our tāne. Now, there's many causations, but I just want to highlight 2 for today's kōrero. Our young men, they're having motor vehicle accidents that are causing serious injuries. And our kaumātua kuia, they're having serious falls. Now, 25% of Māori are less likely to make a claim. Now, there are some real access issues which I'll bring to light today in this kōrero. And also, Māori are twice as likely to make a sensitive claim. Now, you may ask, what's a sensitive claim? For the purposes of this kōrero, it's an injury that's caused as a result of sexual violence. Now, there's no surprise that 70% of them that are making those claims are wahine. But put simply, Māori are more likely to sustain a serious injury, life-impacting injury, but are less likely to access the very services that they have every right to receive. So we need to focus on Māori and commit to resources and support to address these concerns. Fourth, our research tells us that there are several barriers to access. I mean, there's 8 here, but there's a whole list, and a lot of the lists don't all fall under the scope of what ACC can do. We need to link with other agencies to get us there, but I'm just wanting to highlight a few here. One, obviously, cost, and we are looking at areas where we can address, we can analyze the circumstances and look to provide some of these services at no cost. We acknowledge that taking time off work is just not easy and or costly. Also, whānau commitments. I can remember I was up in Matamu, and there up in the Eastern Bay of Plenty, a lot of them, what they said is they're just too busy to stop and get their own care. You know, so that must be hard workers up there. Also, the distance for services. I mean, my mum's a good example. She lives in Nuhaka, and there's no health providers in Nuhaka, nor will there ever be. Neither in Mahia, and their local DHB is a few hours away in Hawke's Bay. Also, there's been a clear lack of trust. You know, they've given it a go, they've had a negative experience and made a commitment that they'll never want to experience that again. Also, there's a lack of information. We don't read about, this is the step-by-step process when you get injured. You get injured and then you just sort of try and work it out. And so there's a real lack of information and awareness that we need to work to establish navigators to be able to support our pirutaki. And also being whakamā, or the opposite, which my dad's a party of, which is the too proud basket. You know, but we need to listen to Māori and take action so that we can improve in access, experience and outcomes for Māori. But finally, we've heard from you. We've heard from providers and whānau. And like my own whānau who voiced their concerns, you know, you can see that there are a number of things that organisations like ACC need to address. But the main focus that I just want to highlight is that they've said, you know, Māori have said many times, there's a lot of talk, but no action. You know, and I can remember when I first started this role, I sat down with one of the exec and, you know, he said, you know, Alden, everyone's telling me what the problems are. I'm very clear on what the problems are, but no one is telling me how to fix it. And so my response there was, well, I'll give you a how, and you just give me the approval, and we'll start addressing it. And so this is what we're doing, whānau. We're not piloting Rongoā Māori within ACC, we're embedding Rongoā Māori. This is not something that we're going to test, and then once we see a failure, we're going to scrap it. We're embedding Rongoā Māori, and so any learnings or anything that we need to improve on, we just need to work together to sort out, to make sure that it, you know, it matures as we go on. So this is just a bit of a light journey thus far. So in June 2020, Rongoā was established, around the same time that I started this role. I acknowledge also that there were many people within ACC before me that got it to this point. So this was not just my doing. This was, many leaders and brave and bold people, both in the Rongoā community and also within ACC with their skill sets to be able to establish it. My role was to operationalise it going forward. So what we did is we turned the lights on. We realised there was a lot of problems, and we tried to fix it. We didn't advertise it for a year, and this was my reason is I wasn't happy with the controls, and I'll talk about some of those challenges later on. But what we did do is we established a dedicated national Rongoā service team. We also established last year a governance group, the Rongoā Advisory Panel, which gave us a bit of a guide and steer on some real big key issues that we are now looking to renew. So, a bit of a plug. Help us there. We've also developed some processes and controls, and we've set up places where whānau Māori providers can provide insight so that we can take that insight and then come up with a plan to address them. Another proud moment last year is that we were able to enable telehealth. Now, telehealth is a service that is more, not physical. So it wasn't physical Rongoā, but it was the ability to be able to receive Rongoā support during the COVID-19 restrictions. Now, this year is all about continuous improvement going forward, which I'll talk about a bit more later. So, what are the benefits that we've seen? Keeping in mind, whānau, from 2 years ago to now, we've got 2 years of data. So we've got some really rich things to highlight. First of all, on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see a picture of Aotearoa. That picture sort of highlights the different Rongoā practitioners that are registered with ACC and where they sit. And as you can see, it sort of follows kind of where the communities of Māori tend to populate. We've got over 70 registered Rongoā practitioners, the largest at the moment thus far compared to other public sector organisations. As such, we have over 2,000 kiritaki that have accessed Rongoā Māori services. We've also funded over 15,000 sessions. Now, when we first enabled Rongoā, we thought that it was going to really do well for Māori, which it has, don't get me wrong. But because it's available to all, we have now from almost 100% Māori when we first started to only 63% Māori that are accessing Rongoā. Why? Because more non-Māori are loving Rongoā. And so now we sit at 63%, and we sort of forecast that it will probably land at about 50-50, as it matures, because more non-Māori are loving Rongoā. Now, when we look at access, is it really important? How do we open it up? How do we make it more accessible? Well, Rongoā itself is creating better access. We now have 19% of new ACC claimants. So these are people that have never entered the system. They are choosing Rongoā as their pathway of care. Now, of those that are choosing Rongoā as their pathway of care, 71% of people that are choosing Rongoā no longer need any other ACC support. So that's telling us, whānau, that Rongoā as a standalone service and also as a support of other services, helping our kiritaki and others. That graph at the bottom, as you can see, we started 2 years ago. The blue line represents existing ACC claims, and the grey represents new claims each month. And as you can see, we've steadily grown over time. Ignore the June data, that hasn't come in yet. June 2022. So what are the benefits from what whānau are seeing? What are the outcomes? What are the impacts? Well, again, as I mentioned before, I could spend the next 30 minutes talking about this, but because I've only got a bit of time, I'll try to summarize these things. So let's just talk about outcomes for now. Reduce pain and symptoms, reduce need for medication, increase quality of life and well-being. I think when we look at access again, and this is a comment made in one of the surveys that we received, Rongoā provides an entry point for whānau to re-engage with a health system that many Māori had given up on. Māori feel they have ownership of their health. They feel they have control over their body and well-being through the choice that Rongoā provides. Māori feel Rongoā is highly valued. They're loving it that it's now recognised, and that's probably the one I get the most. They feel honoured, respected. They love it that it aligns with tikanga Māori practices and principles, and it's an important choice for whānau. I can remember, was it 2 weekends ago, Manawa Ora came to Poriroa, and I knew my daughter had a sore leg, so I said, hey, let's go get some rongoā. And she hadn't experienced rongoā before. In fact, she hasn't even experienced physio either. So I gave her a go, and man, Eva is an advocate for rongoā. But, you know, rongoā is a connection to te ao Māori through reo, karakia, whakapapa, waiata, pūrākau. It provides important cultural connections. Rongoā is a holistic option that not only heals the physical tinana, but also aspects of a person. You know, mentioned tinana, but it also highlights hinengaro, wairua, whānau culture, all things that a lot of you are familiar with, but I'm just plugging to those that are listening here in this kōrero that are still a bit curious on whether rongoā is a good thing. But what rongoā has demonstrated is that it is improving access. It is improving a better experience for Māori, and it is giving us good outcomes for Māori and many other kiritaki. So what are the challenges? Well, the main one, and it all rolls up to legislation, and let I just sort of highlight the root of it all. Our current legal framework of ACC is based on a Western framework of health, not mātauranga Māori. And as a result, I know that we've had a lot of concerns about where we fit in the system and how it's currently being treated, but that's the sort of key thing to be aware of. Now, if we need to rewrite the ACC legislation, which is one of our action points, we need to understand how that happens. You see, ACC cannot rewrite its legislation. This is the responsibility of the Minister in Parliament. And the Minister in Parliament, their main advisor is MB. And so to make this all happen, ACC needs to work with other government agencies and also with the Rongoā community to provide the right advice to MB so that MB can support us to our minister. And this is not an easy job. This is not a, you know, over the weekend type thing. This is a long-term approach. But in the interim, we need to have a bit of Māoitanga. You know, Māori is very innovative with the circumstances, and that's kind of where we sit. So we're looking at ways to really address how we can work on our work around it so that Rongoā continues to be available, but also at the same time to remove some of the pain points that we have. The registration process, so that's Rongoā Māori practitioners wanting to register with ACC. Now, when we first enabled this, there was a lack of controls, which meant that anyone could register as a rongoā provider. Now, that's a huge risk to the rongoā community. We had people that were, say, massage therapists, changing their name to Miria, and then trying to register as a rongoā practitioner. And so there was no way for us to ensure that those registering as a rongoā practitioners were tika and pono. So our team had to implement a process that was endorsed by the Rongoā Advisory Panel to ensure that each one that is registered has the expertise to deliver safe services. Now, this included police vetting and other checks and endorsements, but it needed to happen because there's currently no governing body that gives us that assurance. It's down to the hapu, iwi, and whānau level. And so, our main goal here is to ensure that our kiritake receive safe services. And to get us there, our team has had to do a lot of the heavy lifting. Also, the current process requires ACC approval with an active claim before you can access these, before services can be accessed. Now, just be transparent here. This is a pain point for everyone involved. ACC kaimahi, rongoā practitioners, and also the client and their whānau. So like I mentioned before, we're looking at how we can work with our legislative framework in an innovative way to start removing some of those barriers. Cultural safety within ACC has also been a challenge. We have over 3,500 ACC staff, and not all of them are Māori. In fact, not all Māori want to work for ACC. And so we have to recognise with the people that we have how we build their cultural uplift and understanding of rongoā. So what the teams have done is we've set up some internal education, and that includes things like learning huddles, road shows, induction modules, and also a mihi to a lot of the rongoā practitioners that have put up their hand and said, hey, I'd like to help in our local rohe. So, appreciate all the support, and that needs to continue. There's probably one other. It's not written here. But one of the other challenges, I'll be honest, and I'll say it, some of you fellas. Now, when I was a teenager surfing, because again, surfing's part of your well-being, a mate of mine was struggling. And so I went over, this was out in the surf. And so I went over to help him. And he started throwing me under the water. Now, it was hard to help him when you get thrown under the water. And to be honest, that's what it feels like sometimes. And that's what actually happens trying to address these challenges with the rongoā community, only some. We are here to help. But if you push us under the water, it's hard for us to help. So we need to understand that we have walked in your shoes. We understand you. We're listening. Our frameworks and our strategy is all about trying to help us. But we need a partner together to make it all happen. Sorry, I'm making trouble for that, but get what. So what's up next? As I mentioned, we aim to make legislative changes to recognise rongoā with the mana that it holds. Now, this will enable a more streamlined process and will remove a lot of the barriers. But again, this requires us to work with, Māori Health Authority, Ministry of Health and others, and also MB and also the rongoā community. We need to be able to provide the right advice so that we can make the necessary changes. And as I mentioned before, that's the long-term play. And the current thing is all about how do we use our Māoritanga and come up with some creative ways to really improve that process. As I mentioned, we have recognised the registration process is a bit of a real pain point, and so we're really focusing on building a robust Rongoā Māori workforce to provide support and to really streamline our processes, and also to speed up the registration process. I mean, if it's taking too long, some of it is our problem. In fact, I'll probably go the next step and say, if we get all the right information, we can turn around the registration process in a week. The thing that takes the longest is things not being asked or answered properly and us having to wait for responses. But also, police vetting is important because we don't know who's good or who's not. And so that's the process that we've chosen to take on board until we figure out a better process going forward. But that's out of our hands, and that takes up to 21 days to get that information back. Also, increased engagement. Look, the more people that experience Rongoā, the better. The more people that know about Rongoā, the better. And we'll continue to support and promote and advocate for Rongoā, to really raise the profile across Aotearoa. Now, this includes, us attending events like this, conferences and other channels. Our team are dedicated, and we'll continue to build relationships further with the Rongoā community across the motu. And also there are new opportunities. I mean, at the moment, our legislation is really focusing on maternity birth injuries, which is now recognised. So that's, again, something to celebrate. And our team is really opening up a procurement area to really focus on how we get the right care for our mamas and their pepe and their whānau when those injuries occur. And we're really looking to utilise Rongoā and being able to set up some type of contract where, again, removes a lot of these barriers so that those services can be received without any pain points. But finally, we have a few other exciting initiatives with Rongoā, which I've been told that I can't tell you yet. So consider this a trailer, watch this space, but exciting times ahead. Anei te whakatauki, he manako te kaura I kore ai, wishing for the crayfish won't bring it. We all know this too well. We've had to work hard for change. Across ACC, we're working on many initiatives underway that are embracing Rongoā and kaupapa Māori solutions to support whānau better. All this is being done with the intention of making ACC more equitable for whānau. The whānau-centric holistic approaches that underpin Rongoā and kaupapa Māori approaches will speak across the motu. We're presenting whānau Māori with choice and presenting new opportunities for injured kiritake from all backgrounds and cultures, so that they can experience tried and tested Māori approaches to healthcare and healing. Whānau have been asking for this for a long time. We are now doing it. We know that wishing for the crayfish won't bring it, but creating change through working in partnership will. He kape ake ngā kōrero, me mihi anō ki a koutou katoa, tēnā koutou, kia ora koutou katoa.
Tēnā koe te rangatira o tira ko te kaupapa matua o tēnei rā ko tō kōrua ko tō hoa rangatira rā motuhake. Nō reira ko te aroha pūmau, te tuapapa o tō ao. Nō reira kua rua te tau kōrua e mārena ana he tino toha nui no no kōrua, te waimarie, so happy anniversary, e hoa. Thank you for sharing it romantically with all of us. But the thing was is that you really did bring your heart to this kōrero. Tyne said in our chat that he really appreciated the realness that you bring. It mustn't be easy in your position. Engari kei te rangona te re tōtanga o whakaro, how deeply you feel about this and how important it is to you. To be honest, not a kōrero about ACC would be interesting, but you made it so. So tēnā koe i te whānui o kōrero, because the way that you spoke to this made us, I think, understand the opportunities, all of the challenges. I'm not very happy about this sort of trend that I'm seeing, that you and Diana have said, tai hoa ka kite, tai hoa ka rongo. So you've got another announcement. Can you at least tell us when that's coming if we watch this?
So July is what I've been told. It's embargo till July. So, I think the 11th is kind of around about time. But, I did say to the team, I said, man, thank you for telling me, because I was just going to share that with everyone. But, again, this is why you have some really smart people working around you to sort of keep you safe. And, so, again, I'm just sort of following the rules here to make sure that I don't get in trouble. So, yeah.
Kei te pai. Matahi tēnā, so we'll take what we can get. We do have a few minutes. There's a couple of issues going on with the Wi-Fi at the Koras, and lots of people have asked questions. And can I just clarify for everybody, the live Q&A is where you can all ask questions no matter what time. You don't have to worry about waiting for the Q&A. They'll get put up. And also, if it's quite a specific question, there has been a decision to make sure that those pātai go to the specific speakers so that they can take their time to make sure that if it's quite a specific question, they're going to answer you with the time that it deserves as well, and especially if it's something that's quite particular to you. Engari, mena paina kia koe, Alden, ka tuku pātai tonu kia koe. I'll just ask you, a couple of the questions that came in, if that's okay, because of the Wi-Fi issues, and feel free to let me know when those are fixed at the quarters. So in terms of a rangatahi question, tēnā rā koutou katoa, te rōpū rangatahi e hono mai nei. How can we make rongoā services available as prevention solutions and enhancements rather than just when people get injured or unwell? Because you did speak to that aspect of ACC of prevention. So what is the space for rongoā there, and ana rangatahi awesome with their neat pātai?
Yeah, no. Good pātai. So just to sort of highlight, the space that I work in is all about care and treatment. So I do kind of look at that space. There is another team that focuses on injury prevention. But as I've sort of gone through this journey, this is exactly the questions that Māori tend to always ask. They don't give us stuff about where you sit within ACC. They just want to make sure that we can not only care for our kiritaki when they're injured, but also prevent and give us that maintenance in which rongoā is able to provide. And so what we've had to do is really join forces now. So now in ACC, prevention and partnership are in the same team. And when we go out to design services, it comes with both lenses. And so moving forward for rongoā, absolutely will be part of the prevention and maintenance of whānau. But also, when they're injured, rongoā is there available also. So again, watch this space, but this is something that we've purposely done because we have listened to Māori, and we understand that it's not always about fixing someone when they have a problem. Rongoā is absolutely there for maintenance and prevention, and that's something that we are also on board on as we go through this design. Now, this does link to things that are embargoed. So again, another trailer, but Yeah, watch this space. Yeah.
You're tuning into Taka Waititi the trailers. This is the Marvel universe.
Yeah. So hopefully it will get us all excited, because rongoā is a beautiful thing. It's something that we need to recognise, been passed down from our ancestors, but it's been in the underground, in homes for a very long time. And now that it's been lifted, it's just really awesome to be able to share it and promote it. Yeah.
What we can say for sure is that Rongoā Māori is respected in ACC.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ka pai. Kua pau te wā, ki tēnei wāhanga, engari taiho ake ka whakawhiti kōrero tonu tātou. Thank you so much again for being so open. We really appreciate. Mā reira, e tino rongo ai tātou katoa, te whānuitanga o tēnei kaupapa. When people open up like you have today, then we get so much more out of our kōrero, and we'll look forward to talking to you when we have our Q&A. Nō reira, tēnei ka mihi, mai oha ki a koe te rangatira, tēnā koe. Kua pai ngā hononga, so we have got all of our connections going on now. Nō reira, he kai kōrero anō kei te haere ake. Another speaker now before we do have our Q&A. And just to affirm again, please put your questions in anytime. We're loving seeing your interaction with your emojis as well. Then we know that we're all actually listening. We're getting as much as we can out of this day that we have set aside. Mo koutou katoa, o tira mo tātou katoa. Nō reira, e karema tēnei ka mihi a ka tuku I te reo karanga kia pā ropata Rob McGowan. Rob currently works for the Department of Conservation, DOC, and is the Amoara Tū for Ngā Whenua Rāhui. He's well respected nationally for his work with and for the restoration of Rongoā Māori practice in New Zealand, Aotearoa me te Waipounamu. He's been involved for more than 20 years in teaching, researching and assisting Māori re-engage, and as I believe Rihanna said as well, is to remember who we are. Koina te momo kōrero, and this has been a strength in his mahi as well. Re-engage with traditional uses of New Zealand native plants, particularly for medicine as Rongoā Māori. He's also provided input into aspects of intellectual property issues relating to the Waitangi Tribunal's Y262 report, and served as a Rongoā Māori advisor to numerous government committees, Māori tribal authorities, and for several Rongoā Māori related research and education initiatives. Kia mōhio mai koutou. He's a former Catholic priest and a fluent speaker o tō tātou reo Māori. In 2019, he returned to the Ministry of Health to lead the Māori Health Directorate. Oh, actually, I'm not quite sure if that part's right. Hoi anō. Kia mōhio mai koe e pā, kua nui ngā mihi kia koe kātika, nō reira nau mai, whakapiki mai, ki te atamira nei, ka mihi tonu kia koe.
Tēnā koe te Stacey, te mea tuatai māku e tautokana tō tātou akiri tengeti ata nei no re e tohu atohi tianga nui ngā mi kia koe. Ai te kāna ngā kōrero mai nei a rātou mā, ko te atu te tīmatanga, ko te atu te whakamutunga ki wakapainga tōni ngā wakatoa, ko tini te kaupapa tu mai tēnei wā. Nō reira, mihinu kia koutou, mātakitaki mai kia mātou I tēnei wā. Mea hau tēnei, kia hau e tū mai I mua tēnei mihini. Nō reira, āroho mai kia mātou. And it's a bit of a strange situation to me, so do excuse me. And because I rave on forever, I've actually written everything down and to keep myself on point and to be as useful as possible. And what I've written will be available to people. We'll make it available after the talk. But you know, we do need to remind the context in which we're having this conference. Māori health is in crisis and the situation continues to get worse. The current system is fighting a losing battle. But it's not just Māori health. The whole health system in New Zealand is under increasing stress, and the country is losing its battle to find a solution. And admittedly, COVID has helped, but even without COVID, it was very evident that the health system in New Zealand wasn't able to provide for the health. So we asked the question, how can the Rongoā Māori help? And how can the Māori understanding of health and healing help, not just for Māori, but for the whole of Aotearoa? But then that's only, the whole planet is in crisis. Global warming, human-induced climate change, shortage of critical resources, etc., threaten the very existence of life on Earth. We are facing the biggest threat to the planet since the demise of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. And it hasn't been caused by a meteor strike, it's been caused by us, people. And we're doing our best maybe to mitigate the situation, to try and ensure that we can continue to live the lives we know and that we like. But we know that we will fail. We live in a me world so dominated by self-interest that we're incapable of making the changes that will give us a chance of a long-term future. So where do we find a solution? One that gives hope for the future, especially for those who come after us. Experience makes it very clear. We are not going to find the answers for the current crisis out of the thinking that created it. Too many of the powers that dominate the planet are too entrenched in their own self-interest to allow the changes that are desperately needed. We need a fresh start based on a different set of priorities. This set of priorities is already here in the wisdom of the old people. The time has come to recognize that and follow the teachings that have been handed down to us. So the full title of this paper is Rongo Māori as Māori Understand It to Be, not as others perceive it to be. One of the main reasons why Rongo Māori has never been accepted by mainstream New Zealand is that the medical profession, for the most part, presumed that they knew what Rongo Māori was, traditional Māori medicine, and had decided it had nothing to offer. It's not real medicine, they keep telling each other. It is faith healing and based on primitive superstitions and the like. Very few stopped to ask Māori what it actually was, and not many wanted to. And they didn't apply to, and that didn't just apply to Rongo Māori. To me, it's one of the big mysteries really is why has the New Zealand health sector not actually opened up to herbal medicine? Why are they so distrustful? When it is so supported by research, when it's so verified by centuries of well-documented use and accepted and utilized by so many first world countries. Even a very cautious approach would save Pharmac millions of dollars and benefit many of the people it is currently unable to help. Medical herbalism, like Rongo Māori, hasn't been adequately and fairly considered because mainstream health hasn't wanted to. But remember, our current health system is unable to cope with the current demand. It hasn't got the resources, and given the growing cost of modern healthcare under the current model, the situation will only get worse. Now is the time to look for other options. And for us here in Aotearoa, including Rongo Māori, as Māori understand it to be, is something we have to do. But let's first set aside some of those presumptions, and I'll use myself as an example. As a young priest in Wanganui in the mid-70s, I very much wanted to learn about Rongo Māori as I perceived it to be. I was fired up by my imagining and endlessly bothered the old people with my questions. They listened kindly and told me bits and pieces, but kept telling me things I really wasn't wanting to hear. We don't have to tell you anything about plants, they tell you. All you have to do is to get to know the trees and they will tell you everything you need to know. That didn't help at all because plants can't talk. And then they would say, why do you keep asking about plants? You already have the same medicine. What's that? I kept answering, even though I knew the answer. You have karakia. The foundation of the Rongoā Māori is not rako, plants, trees. It's wairua. It took me a long time to start to understand what they were telling me, and I'm still on that journey. Māori understand health and healing from a very different perspective to that of Western industrial society. As the recent Matariki celebrations have highlighted, it is very much based on close observation of the natural world. The priority is to ensure that we live very much in line to the rhythms and variations of the world around us. That makes for a healthier lifestyle because it draws from the strength and the energy of the Māori that supports life. Māori is found in the connections that enable life to thrive. Now, the Europeans that migrated to Aotearoa in the 19th century came from a world that still had vestiges of connection to the natural world. Christmas, like Matariki, was celebrated at the coldest and darkest time of the year when people's spirits were likely to be low. It was a time to remember and to reconnect and to look forward with new hope for the year that was just beginning. Easter was held when the world of nature was waking up from the cold sleep of winter and celebrated the burst of new life that comes with spring. The trouble is that when these new settlers came to Aotearoa to begin a new life, they not only brought all the things they needed, their technology, their plants and animals and their personal possessions, they also brought their calendar, unchanged from the Northern Hemisphere. They wanted to feel close to home at the most family-centered times of the year, even if they lived on the other side of the world where it didn't snow at Christmas. In doing so, they established a way of life that was fundamentally out of step with the rhythms of the world around them. And we wonder why we have so much trouble in Aotearoa with mental health. We're out of step with the world we live in. Now, Māori have a very different view of their place in the world. And it was vastly different from those who led the industrial development which transformed the whole world in the 19th century. The great developers of the time had a different outlook that actually was very different to that of most of the people of Europe at the time. Very many still lived in their traditional villages and were as horrified as anybody at the whole-scale destruction that the Industrial Revolution brought. All in the name of progress, but they were powerless to stop it. We need to keep reminding ourselves that the great changes in world history seldom happen because the majority overwhelmed the minority, as happened in New Zealand with Māori. Rather, the world has always changed because minorities, sometimes very small minorities with the power, were able to impose their interests and desires on the masses of people who look to them to leadership. Is it any different today? Now, Māori traditionally do not regard the earth as a resource to be utilised for their own purposes. They saw earth, Papa Tuanuku, as their mother, the source of life. Nor did they regard themselves as the masters and the summit of the universe, with the right to use all that the planet contained, living and non-living, for their own purposes. Māori saw themselves as part of the world of Tāne, not as a tuakana, but as a potiki, bound together by whakapapa and intricately interconnected to the web of life. Māori is found in the connections that enable life to thrive. The role of people is to care for the Māori. The integrity of the Māori and its web of connections is greater priority than the rights and needs of any individual species, let alone individual people, the me people of the 21st century. That means the needs and ambitions of individuals must never take precedence over those of others, not just other people, but all living beings and Papa Tuanuku herself, especially in a way that the network of life is impaired. That includes the smallest living creatures, the microbes too small to be seen. They are the key to life on Earth. Now, we've summed this up in this little book, Te Waiwaka. You know, when we think of it, it provides us with a pathway that could lead to a profoundly different future, one that provides hope. The words come from those who listen to Papa Tuanuku and can hear her directions. Now, such a view has profound implications on health, not just community health, but that of each person. Health is best measured in relation to the whole universe and the whole network of life that binds us together. Modern medicine focuses strongly on symptoms that manifest themselves in each individual that presents himself as unwell: blood pressure, oxygen levels, sugar levels, and so on. And that's important, essential. But how can that person effectively be treated without major consideration of the world in which they live? Many of the sicknesses that contribute greatly to Māori ill health are lifestyle sicknesses derived from the environment in which they live. That has been long recognised, but the focus is confined to the social circumstances in which people live. But how can people be well when the whenua is unwell? In years past, many Māori were able to supplement their diet with what the land and the sea could provide. Those days have passed, and most Māori live in cities and can only access such traditional kai as a kinaki on special occasions, if at all. Māori have been alienated from the whenua through the process of colonisation, and the sea is so affected by human activity, overharvesting, sedimentation and pollution, that it struggles to provide. Now, there's much more involved than the loss of the physical resource. Māori identity comes from their connection to the whenua. Rongoā Māori is not coming out of a group of tohunga meeting in a whare nui or in a special place philosophising on the deep questions of life. It's the outcome of their interrelation with the whenua over many years. Rongoā Māori is the knowledge of the land from the people who belong to the land. It is the result of their interaction with the whenua over many generations. It's the knowledge that they have accumulated by living on the land, working with the land, harvesting from the land all the time, listening, watching, hearing. When Māori lose connection to the whenua, they lose their identity. They cannot see themselves apart from the whenua and the myriad of connections that make them who they are. When that happens, when they are truly lost. I believe the greatest step forward in Māori health in post-World War II Aotearoa, when the Great Migration to the cities happened, has been the Waitangi Tribunal. The tribunal will never be able to restore the physical losses that Māori have experienced, but it has done much to restore mana. It's helped take away that shame and powerlessness that has inhibited attempts to maintain identity. But the land remains unwell. The moana is losing its ability to provide. More and more people struggle to survive, and that's reflected in the statistics. So what can the Rongoā Māori, as Māori understand it to be, offer? The foundation, remember, of Rongoā Māori is wairua, not rākau. Not that rākau are unimportant. It has much to offer, much more than people realise. Wairākau continues to be widely used and continues to provide immense help to many people, often more successfully than what mainstream medicine can provide. And it's not faith healing, as some would believe. Certainly there's a psychosomatic element in availing ourselves of the rongoā used by tupuna, but science has demonstrated that many rongoā are safe and effective regardless of who uses it. But today, Wairākau's ability is limited because there's not enough people who have the in-depth knowledge of the ngahere and its plant. That limits many rongoā practitioners to the range of species, the ones that they know. The other major challenge is accessing rongoā. You know, most of the rongoā grow on the regenerating fringe of the bush, the tōtara hoi, as we call it in Whanganui. There they are either eaten by animals or they are crushed out, pushed out by the weeds. In many cases, they completely disappeared from the local landscape. So to restore the use of wairako, there needs to be a major effort both to reconnect people to the ngahere and its Miria, teaching them how to identify and harvest the plants they need, as well as a major effort to re-establish Rongoā plants in the places where they should be. That means connecting Rongoā Māori to the major efforts nationwide to reduce the effects of browsing animals, control weeds, and replant the forest. Much is happening on that front, Te Uru Rākau, the 1 billion trees program, Jobs for Nature, and lots of other things. The Rongoā Māori practitioners need to make that a priority to be involved in such work. Remember the advice that I was given at the beginning of this paper? You need to get to know the plants and they will tell you everything you need to know. Helping to heal the ngahere, helping to heal the whenua by bringing back the plant that it needs can be a pathway to find their own healing. Remember, the main task of the Rongoā plants is to heal the whenua, not us, at least not in a self-centered way. We need to remember where we fit in this whole way, this world of tāne. Nevertheless, the foundation of Rongoā Māori is wairua, or taha wairua, but again, as understood by Māori. Māori see the world as an interconnected whānau bound together on many levels, both physically and non-physically, arranged in a hierarchy based on whakapapa. They often use the term taha wairua to describe this perspective, often translated as spiritual dimension, but that's an inadequate translation. There's a difference between wairua and Māori, for instance. Perhaps it is safe to say that taha wairua relates to the many dimensions that constitute the wholeness of the connections that sustain life. That means much more than physical connections. Taha wairua is about relationships and connections that are so basic that they're often taken for granted. Māori don't take it for granted. They are fundamental to how they see the world. Well, so what is the relationship between fish and water? Obviously, without water, fish would die. If the water is polluted, they would struggle and maybe die. Māori would describe that as saying that the Māori is weakened or fading or even extinguished. The connections are broken, Māori mate. The Māori exists in the connections that sustain life. Taha wairua is about the many connections and relationships, physical and non-physical, that enable life to thrive. So that applies especially to Rongoā. Healing is much more than helping a person recover from a sickness or injury. A health service is much more than providing the help that is needed for a community to deal with sickness and injury, and somewhere to fade away when life has run its course. Fundamentally, our focus needs to be restoring the connections that are needed, not just for the individual or the community in which they live, but for the whole environment. You cannot have a healthy community when the land where people live is so severely modified that the children never get to play on grass and feel the soil, that the rivers are too unsafe to swim in, or where they never hear birds sing and tell them about the changing of the seasons. Because of all these things are needed for us to be truly and wholly well. Too often our children are growing up in a world in which they find their connections from the electronic devices that dominate their lives, and the foods from the many fast food options which provide them with the calories they need, mostly too many calories, yet deprive them of the range of nutrients they need to grow. We are born of the earth, and we need to be connected to the earth to find who we are, where we belong, and for us and the whole whānau of life to thrive. Ka ora te whenua, ka ora te tangata. Now this sounds like a lot of dreams, but you know our health system is struggling with no hope of improvement in sight. So it's going to get worse. We know that. So we have to be bold, and we have to look for answers where they haven't been used before. We won't find the answers in our current crisis and the thinking that caused it. We need a fresh start, a new beginning. That can be found in the mātauranga of those who have been here longest. Rongoā Māori, as understood by Māori, is part of that heritage. Let's focus not on sickness, but on wellness. Let's not think about your health or my health, but our health, meaning the whole family of life, the plants, the birds, everything. Not just us humans. Let's care for our tuakana, the trees, the birds, that they can care for us. Let's most of all care for Papa Tuanuku, our mother. When she is well, we can be well. We've made a big start with the celebration of Mātariki this year. The beginning of a new year, with a step with what's happening around us. That's the beginning. Let's build on it. You know, ka ora te tanga, te whenua, ka ora te tangata. That's my thoughts for our kaupapa, and hoping it's useful. I suppose the last thing I want to say is there are so many wonderful people coming through, so many wonderful things, so many amazing things happen. Despite all the grim things we read about in the paper, I've really got hope. Kia ora tātou.
Nā koe te rangatira kia koutou hoki ngā kai reo kōrero te ata e. Nei rā te mihi kia koutou o ngā kōrero kia whārikia ngā taonga no tua whakarere e. Tēnā rā koutou e.
Tēnā urue ki wā, tēnā urue. Tēnā urue. Ok, a koe a Stacey, ko pautahau.
Mena kua pautō hau, kua whai mato i taua hau. He hau a tāhua, he hau miri ngā whakaro me te wairua, kua tino ora mātou i o kōrero e pā. Mārake te kite atu, he mātanga koe ki tēnei mahi. Tēnā koe i tō ata tuhi i o kōrero, kia u tonu ai ki te kaupapa o te rā, engari me ki pēnei a hau, he rongo wā te whakarongo atu ki a koe.
Tēnā koe.
Ko te painga atu mena ka whai tata katoa i ngā tuhinga o au kōrero, nā te mea he maha ngā mātauranga kei roto. You know, the things that you shared with us today, ka titia ki te ngākau. You know, we'll remember it, you have such a beautiful way of expressing in both languages. The opportunity that we have, the understanding that we have, and I love how you were told to get to know the trees, and at that point the trees wouldn't speak to you. But do the trees speak to you now? Kei te rongo koe, te kōrero a ngā rākau me te taiao? Can you? I believe that you've shown us today that you can hear and see things that perhaps the rest of us don't. So, e mihi ana kia koe te papa. O tira kia tātou. So, we have this opportunity now to have all of our speakers from this morning join us, and then we will get to your pātai so that we can continue this discussion. Me he wānanga, ne? So what I'm really enjoying is that everyone is engaging in all the opportunities that this platform offers us in terms of asking questions, in terms of having discussions. So just to say again, the live Q&A is where you can put your questions. They will be starred and I'll see them and I'll say that they've been answered. The discussion forum is more for you to whakawhiti kōrero, to have a kōrero with others in the roku. So just to make that distinction, e hoa mā, tāpiriki tēnā, and as well as that, there have been requests for the presentations that we saw this morning to be made available, and generously our kai kōrero have agreed to that, so that will be available as well. And questions that are quite specific will be sent to each speaker in the hope that they can have time to specifically answer you as well. Nō reira ka hono mai ngā kai kōrero o te ata. Kei te rongo mai koe pā, can you hear me now?
I can now. I can now. I can
Okay,
hear
but
you. It's almost as well I can hear the trees, but there's no trees here. It's quite funny talking about these things in such an artificial environment. And really, the healing comes from just being in the places where they are.
Right. So is that part of your practice, being in the taiao, being in the ngahere?
More and more, I'm shocked at how few New Zealanders, how few Māori actually really know the bush, Even the hunters don't know how to find deer and pigs, but they don't know actually, they don't light a fire to singe their pigs, they bring a gas blower. I mean, actually, we've really lost it. And we've got to deal with it desperately if we're really going to actually, how can you hear the land crying when you're so busy rushing through it? And the thing that really came out of our little Tiwai Waka book is that people could hear the land crying. And it's distressing. And it happens to me sometimes I just can't move. And so we've got to listen. And we are the babies. It's for us to care for our mother because she desperately needs it. And all this mental health issues that we see in all the time, you go back into the ngahere, if you can find ngahere as well. Go to the sea and feel the waves lapping, and then you will find a healing that no counsellor will ever give you. And we just need to remember that's where our healing comes from. And all these wonderful people, counsellors, kai rongoā, we're helpers. But the whenua is the mother, she heals.
Tēnā koe. And I guess if I can share something, when those that horrific terrorist attack in Christchurch happened, and I come from Mototahi, I felt a real need to go home and to feel the whenua and to feel the nawe. Ke hikina te nawe. Kona hoki tētahi āhuatanga ne e pā.
Aye. But to go to the running water and throw carry it out to the sea or onto the waves as the tide comes in and the tide will take it away. People don't realise just how amazing that can be to free you from those burdens. Sometimes it takes longer to heal the scars, but how do we free ourselves from our burdens? Give it back to the water.
Kia ora. Now, in terms of people, a few people have asked us in the chat, what do we understand about sharing this mātauranga with tauiwi? You talked about matariki, te whānuitanga o tēnei kaupapa I nei rā, and how it has been shared. What are some things that you think that people can consider in our sharing, and I guess lines and personal protections we need to consider there?
Well, I suppose the first response that comes to mind, one of the old people told me, you ask what you want to know, let us tell you what you need to know. And I think that's something to keep in mind. And secondly, people who work with Rongo, we get played by people who want to actually get access to knowledge so they can make a lot of money. And so we're having to work really, really hard. We've got to get out of this me thinking to the we thinking, so we need to share our knowledge in a way that it's kept safe. And we're trying to work out how to do that. So that's a big issue that we are really doing our best. Another trailer, I suppose. We are working on it. We are making progress. We haven't got there yet, but we've got the Prime Minister over there signing up all these agreements. Is she also making sure that the agreements she signs are in accordance with what is guaranteed in the treaty? Now, that didn't happen with the signing of the free trade agreement with England, with Great Britain. That hurt people a whole lot. There are some basic things that we have to put in place safely, securely, before it's safe to share a lot of the knowledge that actually relates to Rongoā. You know, we've got to stop ducking and making excuses, you know, because we are answerable to our tuakana. And we are just babies on this planet. You know, we must not ever do anything unless we ask the whenua first. And if she says no, and that little voice tells you so, we don't do it. And if we have to do that if we're going to survive, because the other thing is very, very clear. The planet will survive without us, but we won't survive without the planet. And, you know, the dinosaurs, they got over the dinosaurs disappearing, even though we'd love to see a Tyrannosaurus Rex running around. But, you know, it'll get over us. We might be just a failed experiment, you know. So the basis of learning really is humility. And humility isn't saying I'm not as good as you. Humility is being honest about ourselves and where we fit in. And the old people have always told us that. You know, we are the Teina, we are the Potiki. Actually, that doesn't make you small by saying that makes you big, because actually you feel at home, you feel at peace. You're in a step with things, and the energy in that rhythm will carry you forward, the rhythm of life. I'm good at raving on, I'm sorry about that.
No, Carl, there's too much humility on your part, because it's actually fantastic kōrero. And everyone is loving it, literally. Kei te tuku i ngā tohu o te aroha nui. And thank you for setting that tuapapa for us, because now we can move into our Q&A. So we'll have all of our speakers of the morning join us. We have a good amount of time to have this wānanga. Tēnā anō kōrua. Ka pai, kua hono mai anō kōrua. And so I will share the questions around. Just a reminder, everybody, you can put them in the live Q&A, and then we will say that they have been answered. So tuatahi nei, nā Teresa tēnei pātai. And it's to you, Eldon. When will you have a database available of Rongoā practitioners for ACC clients to consider when contemplating health and healing provision for their treatment? Currently, a Rongoā pathway must be triggered by the client, yet they're not provided with the information about potential Rongoā Māori providers, for example, or that is that they must already know who they want to be treated by, which is another barrier to access.
Yeah, tēnā koe, thank you for the pātai. Yeah, well aware of that. We have in the external ACC website, if you look up Māori Health and then you go to Rongoā, there is now a list of Rongoā practitioners that clients can choose from. Please keep in mind, we've had to ask each registered Rongoā practitioner whether they wanted the information to be on the website. And so those that are there are available, and it hopefully addresses that concern. But it's not all the registered ones, because some are already too busy and don't want any other people, other clientele, so to speak. So we've had, and also in respect of some of their details, they want to keep it personal and private. So there is a list. It's not the full list, but it will hopefully address that. But yeah, it's been available for a few months. If it is hard to navigate to that website, I will send the link on the chat, or someone in my team that's listening now will send it to me, and they'll put it on the chat. Good.
So if people do want to be listed and currently aren't, do they follow that link as well?
Yeah. Say that again. If people do want to be listed.
So people currently aren't listed but want to be listed.
Yeah. So there's a Kaupapa Māori Health email, but normally when we register you fully, that's part of the process, and then we'll update the website, the external website, so that it's available to anyone that wants to seek support. So I guess probably the real issue is maybe navigating through the website, and so that might be an action for our team that's listening to make sure that it's easily available.
Tēnā koe. He pātai tēnei ki a koe, Rihanna. Going forward, and this is from Donna Kerridge, going forward, how or who will our healers deliver their services through? To date, they can be through DHBs, Māori health providers, and other means. So when the trailer is released, and thank you all for following that theme of Rihanna's, when we know more, what will it look like in terms of delivery of services?
Well, kia ora anō, and just want to acknowledge my fellow panelists today. Tēnā koe, Eldon, pai ki te whakarongo ki tō kōrero e wha, and hari rā marena kia kōrua. That's gorgeous. I love that you put that out there. E pā,
Special day.
ko koe te rongoā ia tātou katoa, just sitting here, the act of listening to your kōrero pā is just, it's a rongoā, and one that was well received today by me as I have been riding the lightning for the last wee while. So, and a really stern reminder too. Just to add to that reminder too, of course, today we find ourselves in that wahanga on our maramataka of whiro. It's interesting, isn't it, that we're here having our kōrero, and of course we know that in this time of whiro, it's a time to be really mindful, be careful. It's a real hea te kōrero me pū mahara I tēnei wā, a time of making sure that we stay close to home. It's interesting. I mean, I always find it amazing with the maramataka pā, and you reminded me of this. Today I made a conscious decision to work from home. I don't know, and I hadn't even looked at my maramataka at that stage, but it was something that, I kind of felt like stay home today, rest, conserve, because a lot of people I think they think of our atua whiro and they go, oh, it's a bad time, but it's not. It's that wahanga where we're mindful about ourselves more than ever, mindful of what we say, and mindful of how we answer questions just quietly. Which is why I raised whiro as an appropriate lead into this question. At the moment, yes, traditionally our rongoā services have been usually provided through, and our Māori providers led out with the kaupapa many years ago, might I add too. It's not a new thing for many of the kaupapa Māori providers, iwi providers, or hapu providers. In fact, it usually goes hand in hand with what they do. I think I mentioned an example like Hokianga Hauora, where they've actually formed a partnership up to make sure that their rongoā services go hand in hand with the way they deliver. It's quite unusual. I'd never seen anything like it, to walk into a hospital setting and see this partnership live and living colour. So for every tangata that's in that hoipera, they have access to those services, and they work very collaboratively. But I take Pā's kia tūpato moment to us all too about the fact that there's more we have to do in these spaces. So, our intention is to grow services, to make sure they expand. As I mentioned before, there are rohe around Aotearoa who have no access to rongoā services, who are driving hours on end to get to them. And we have to do better in those spaces. So our intention is not so much to name who the providers are or who those systems are that will provide it. Eldon's already proven that ACC are there. When I look around the public service sector, there's Hauora that are leading out with rongoā. There is ACC. I know that for education, they've been looking into how they incorporate rongoā into education, for instance. And I know that for many of our kaupapa Māori kura, they're already in that space. They're already promoting that as part of the marautanga of their kura anyway. So there are many different places that are already starting to use this concept for our sports teams. I know for many of if I think about specialised services around, for instance, many of our urologists are starting to use rongoā, because we know that if we intervene early with deep tissue therapy, miri and romi, that we actually have a much better outcome for our people around hip operations and those urology operations. So those are just a few examples. There are many places it should come from, but we'll certainly, we hope to first and foremostly not just grow where we can access services, but actually how do we make sure that we are getting more of our people aware of the services in the first instance, access to the information and education, health literacy stuff, and also building a workforce up that's sustainable. Because one of the things I've noted from our own kairongoa at home, there are, the burnout levels are high because the demand is so deep. And I've got to say, as I've watched some of my kairongoa, they're no longer with us. And they're no longer with us for lots of reasons, but I also am reminded of the real kia tūpato as we sit in this wahanga. So sorry about the long answer.
No, kei te pai, tika tau, and no mata pia te he pa, so on a day when you should be at home and probably want to be at home, we've taken you elsewhere. But thank you for your resilience. And we'll direct this question to you from Kim, saying, Kim says, I'm nervous about that bill, and I know you have understanding around this form of approach. So control over knowledge handed down to us. Rongoā Māori should not be catalogued as medicine. As Pa McGowan states, excuse me, the mainstream health system have never supported Rongoā Māori across the extremely wide spectrum that it involves. Mai ngā atua, tainoa, ki te whenua, ki te moana, ki te ngahere, and all wrapped and supported by Māori and the Wairua and all of those who passed on before us. So this bill should not include our Rongoā Māori kaupapa and allow control over it. I didn't give you much of a heads up there, so I don't know if you can speak specifically to that bill, but probably in a wider sense, kei a koe tahi whakaro ne.
I mean, the Therapeutics Good Act, to my mind, is very much based, draws from a Western way of looking at health and healing. And that's a system that's proved to be inadequate. So I've avoided getting too deeply into it. But in actual fact, we have to do, I suppose, to some extent, what's necessary to patch things up for the long term. But really the challenge to the whole of New Zealand and to the Ministry of Health in particular is, let's step back and start again. Let's first understand, what is health? Health isn't the lack of symptoms. Health isn't measured by physical symptoms, and then we can actually have a context from which we can deal with the matters that are contained in the Therapeutics Goods Act. I think things are too serious for us to do these minor adjustments. And as I've said twice in my paper, we're not going to get the solutions out of the thinking that caused the problem. So that doesn't really quite answer your question, but I think it does give a context in which the Act actually fits in here. I mean, the mere fact of New Zealand, we shouldn't be talking about decolonisation. We should be talking about de-northernisation. We've got to set our whole program according to the Southern Hemisphere, where the sun comes up in the wrong time of the year. Then we can have, if we had Christmas at Mātariki, then we could have a white Christmas, and maybe people might feel happy. Our whole rhythm of life, Māramataka, what you're saying, exactly right. We need to watch carefully and take note. I know if I went and dug up my plants now, they would have changed since the shortest day has passed. And it's that lack of connection to whenua that in actual fact means we recourse to all sorts of other interventions, which at the end of the day are not even going to prove to be adequate. So it's time to be bold, isn't it? We've got to be brave. And New Zealanders are good at that. The people that shifted from Europe to New Zealand were really crazy. They had to have enormous courage. That's our heritage. People who hopped in their canoe and came from Hawaii had to be brave. Just imagine those fellows when it snowed for the first time. You don't get that in Hawaii. But they actually adapted to the world that now was their home. And that's where we've got to actually readdress, Eldon, you spoke about the changes in legislation, we readdress all those things within the context. We've already made a start with Te Awa Tupua, we've actually turned the corner. When you turn the corner in your car, you put your foot down. Well, we're not doing that yet, but I really think we should, and actually look at our whole system, our whole way of being in this country, and then move forward. Therapeutics Good Act will then fall into place as a result of that. Does that sound a bit too bold? I don't know.
No, it doesn't. But I must cross to Rihanna at this point because of the position that you now hold. I see on the tip of your mutu that you have an approach or things you'd like to share with us in terms of what can be done to speak to what Pa has suggested. Te manuka kua whakatakotoria e ia.
Yeah, I tautoko a hau te kōrero, te katoa te kōrero. I think the whole point of a reform, by any other name, is a reset. It's a recalibration of things. Like you don't go and do the same thing you were doing just prior. Otherwise, momo wā, momo taima, momo muni. But most importantly, momo tangata. We've got to be really bold in this next step because. Whilst I know that we all see from an Ao Māori viewpoint that the opportunity that lies inherently, as I've gone around the motu, I hear three themes wherever I go. Huge anger and concern about what is currently happening in our system. The second theme is anxiety, high levels of anxiousness around where we are at and what this change will mean. The third is hope and aspiration. And I've got to tell you, I use that as my boogie board to get on the wave and ride on into shore because that reminds me that that's us, right? This has always been our pathway. Mai te timatanga o tēnei wahanga, mai te taimaitanga o tō tātou whānau tauiwi, we have been hopeful and aspirational and hospitable, all the good words right from the beginning. And we have even tried to share our knowledge and our esoteric prowess with our visitors. And then we tried to create a space that said, actually, we realize that you can't be taught, so we're going to write a little document that makes sure we protect our stuff while you get control of your stuff. And of course, here we are. Ko tai te wā. So I totally agree that we have to do something different. The reform going forward for Hauora, and let's be clear. I agree with Pa. I said it in the beginning of my kōrero too. It is not the absence of disease, it is the presence of well-being. And well-being is not measured by those things that you might traditionally think is health. Well-being is about, and if I can just share this really quickly, though it's going to feel like it's long. Someone asked me while we were out talking to our people, what are your hopes and aspirations? And mine are really simple. I expect that every child, mokopuna of our people, every person who has whakapapa back to our atua, that they would expect what they are entitled to, which is, a life of well-being, a life of oranga, to be supported by their whānau, to have a village wrapped around them, to be able to reach out to people when they need support, to be able to dial up hope and aspiration, and not only see the misery that we've encountered throughout our journey. It is a legacy conversation for our babies. There are too many of them that haven't got access to our knowledge, that don't have access to our reo, that they can't talk in their native tongue. And I know that we've accepted that for a number of generations, but we have to put a line in the sand and start reclaiming some of these things for our people on their behalf. We have to almost set a rāhui to get us kick-started and get us back in the groove. So I hear you, Pa, and I hear, and that's my hope for this. So yes, there are bills and there are acts and there is the legislation that actually forms up this whole reform as it is. But what there is too is it's an opportunity. It is the hina tore for me. You know, I can see if I'm sitting noho tatapu right now, I can see the hina tore, and we've got to get to that space. We've got to make sure we keep moving towards that. We don't lose sight of it. Aha ko te aha, aha ko te reo, te rongo, kaua kaua e noho tatapu whānau, me kitea te hina tore I muia tātou I tēnei wā. There's lots to be gained, but we have to reset. That's where we're at.
Tēnā koe taku rangatira. Ka whakarongoa ki a koe, ka pupu ake te tūmanako I roto I au. Have they given you the resource, the people, the structure that you need to be able to do that?
Okay, so that's he pātai tino pai, because lots of people are questioning that. There's a yes and a no thing if we measure it by different accounts, right? So yes, because it won't take a lot of resource for us to rally ourselves and get ourselves ready. No, if you measure it by the fact that Health New Zealand got the 20 billion, was it, and we got 2% of that count. So that's what all of our money counts is. But I think I also said it's our job to get in there and get haul that money out, because there's a lever, there's a big fat lever inside that system which says they must provide equitable outcome for Māori. They can't hide away from that fact anymore. It's part of the legislation. It's part of the intention of Pai. It's making sure that the Māori Health Authority, if nothing else, we get in there and we monitor for outcome, and we make sure that we shift the funding into spaces and places where it needs to be. They won't always understand our knowledge and our desires and our aspirations. You know, we see this time and time again: the shortening, the cutting, and we'll have a whakatau instead of a pōwhiri because it's slightly shorter, and it fits into our dialogue and our kaupapa a little better. These are the things, the challenges of trying to fit our concepts into something that's quite foreign. But that doesn't take. We don't need resources for that. The biggest resource we need to influence right now is our people, the hearts and minds of our people. We need to make sure that they too understand all of these things, that they have access to the things that will help them be, help them grow their own knowledge bases around that set. So, yep, I'm always mindful it takes money to get a lot of these kaupapa across the board. Hell, it takes money just to do this, right? To be able to share these whakaaro and come together in this team. This is money as we speak. So there are some things we need the money for to stretch our thinking, to push that whakaaro out there. And then there are some things where we're going to need to have to rally our people. And I mean rally them, to get them on board with us, to get them back into spaces that they've long been separated from, not by their own choice, but if we draw a line in the sand, whānau, then we've got to be clear. From that day forward, we make a choice. We make an active choice. And if we choose not to come on board with our reo, our tikanga, our kawa, our rongoā, our esoteric knowledge in general, well then, kei a koutou te wā. You might have missed the on that. So, sorry, Stacey.
E no, kei te pai, ngene kona tō kōrero ne, ko tātou katoa hei kai hoi o tēnei waka. We all have a role to play. Ka whakawhiti atu ki a koe, Eldon, and this is a pātai online from Tracy. When will Rongoā Māori claims for ACC be approved within the same timeframes and amount of sessions as Western therapies? Generally, a Western therapy is approved within hours of a claim being accepted with 8 sessions, whereas Rongoā Māori can take weeks, months, for 4 sessions. And again, we do understand that that's not necessarily your area, but congratulations, you're a Māori and we expect each other to know everything.
Yeah, tēnā pai tō pātai. So the answer is we are working at it. It is a pain point. I think just some things to sort of lay out before we sort of go on in this kōrero. We wanted to enable rongoā to be available for our kiritaki. To do that, we had to work within ACC's legislative framework. There's 3 rehabilitation areas that services need to fit in. One is treatment rehabilitation, and that's usually by regulated providers, and they usually provide clinical services. Rongoā is not a recognised treatment provider, nor has the Rongoā community highlighted that a lot of them want to be recognised as a treatment provider. And so it doesn't fit there. The second one is about vocational rehabilitation, which is all about the services getting back to work. And again, there's some requirements and criteria for that service to be provided. And then the last one is social rehabilitation. Now, for us to enable or to start or to have Rongoā available, there's our three rehabilitation areas. To stand up, either being in the treatment provider framework or the vocational rehabilitation framework, it's going to take a long time to get us there. And so in other words, we wouldn't have been able to start. Putting us in the social rehabilitation area has enabled us to start. And we've been able to do that 2 years ago. But under that area, there's some criteria in our legislation. And one of them is that we needed to have an active claim, and we needed to make sure that it's approved by a recovery team in ACC. And so we've recognised that that's just a pain point right now. However, for us to, I guess, address that so that it's within our, whether we're looking at how do we make it a bit more streamlined, there's some creative things that we're working with the commercial team and within legislation and policy where we can start looking at contracting. And so if we were to contract with a Rongoā provider, we can say to them, hey, if you do A, B, and C, we can remove X, Y, and Z. And if we can do that, we'll be able to remove a lot of those barriers. But that's what we're currently working on, and that's going to take at least another quarter or two to be able to get us there. And so it is going to happen. We've got an example currently where we're working with the procurement team in the maternity birth area, where we're looking to contract with Rongoā providers so that when our mamas or wahine are injured for giving birth, that immediately we can streamline those services and make it available. So we are working towards making that a possibility, and we're going to do it, as I mentioned, through our Māoitanga to make that available, but noting that the long-term play here is to not make it fit within any of those three frameworks, but to be able to collectively work with the Rongoā community and with the other providers and agencies to come up with what good looks like, and to make sure that that's our foundation of where Rongoā Māori will stand moa ki tonu atu. And so that's the goal, but that's the long-term play. And anytime you want to build something, you need to dig a deep foundation, you put in your posts and you cement the crap out of it, so it's very hard to move. And so that's what we are going to do, and that is the play that I know Rihanna and John Whanga and everyone else are on board to do. But again, we have to work with what we've got. So currently, it is the current process. We are trying to speed up that approval process so that it happens faster. We are trying to remove those barriers through contracting so that we can remove a lot of those barriers, but acknowledging that the long-term play is going to put us in a good stead going forward.
Tēnā koe. Again, thank you for speaking honestly and in non-policy speak around cementing.
No,
he pai.
In regards to how you speak.
Yeah. No, he pai, he tohu o te hautupu, tō kōrero, it means it's genuine. And thank you for engaging, all of you, with the Rongoā community, because these are the opportunities. And just to remind everyone that these questions, if we don't get to them at this point, will be sent to each of the speakers so that they can engage with you. E rua aku pātai ki a koe pā. First of all, people wanted to know how to get your book. Ki wai waka?
Google Tiwai Waka. I think it's Tiwai Waka, www.tiwaiwaka.nz, and the book. Someone look, I'm a bit confused about how all this works, but someone will get that and send the book out. Or set one, Rihanna. Oh, yep. And
this is why she's the boss.
What's it? Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's just a little book, and it belongs to everybody, you know. So that's that one. So just Google Tiwai Waka. Tiwai Waka is a Wanganui name for Ti Waka Waka, Pi Waka Waka, and all the other sorts of names. But yeah, we're not trying to taka anybody's mana by using that name, but that's the one that came.
Ahau hoki. Kia ora.
Yeah.
Rihanna, kua tukana ketia te hononga. Have you already put that in the chat? Kia ora. Taku pātai kia koe e pā.
Yeah.
What are your views on scientific and biomedical research on rākau rongoā?
I think it needs to happen because you know, the researchers are very special people. They have a gift, you know, and there are some of the rongoā that I use, which are really effective. We need to know how they work and how they can be better utilised, you know. But we need to move within tikanga. And so we've got a research project starting, but not say any more about where, but, and I kept saying to them, before we do anything, we've got to karakia. We've got to put it under that foundation, you know. Researchers sort of sometimes are people that actually don't respect boundaries. You know, we've got to put the boundaries in place to enable that research to happen. I remember one of my colleagues when I was working at a university saying, if I found something that was really good, I'd take it overseas, grow it overseas, and then I'm not bound by anything. I mean, all that sort of nonsense that's going on, the amount of New Zealand, of the rākau that have been exported overseas for medicinal purposes without knowledge even of anybody. So we need to first work out what are those boundaries in which our researchers can work safely, remembering that we are not researching things, we are researching tuakana. You know, we don't have the right to take without asking. We need to actually uphold that respect, which is necessary. So that's the thing. How do we make our researchers safe? You know, so really we are working hard to try and establish those boundaries, to clear the way so that we can benefit. One of the biggest obstacles, I think, is people see, you know, medicine is almost as good as religion for making money. You know, you get some of these billion-dollar church organisations that are established. We've had a few issues in New Zealand recently about that. You know, people get addicted to money. You know, you get addicted to sugar and you get a treatment for that, or alcohol, but addicted to wealth, and you basically mine people's information to create wealth. No, we're not about that. So that's one of the boundaries. So, and the short answer, yes, it needs to happen, but within the boundaries that tikanga provides.
Tēnā koe. Tāpiriki tēnā, I think this is relevant to carry on, and everyone or anyone could answer. John, tell us, will whāmek have the ability to regulate rongoā rākau and how it's used?
Well, I can say that whāmek, we need someone to ensure that the quality of what the rongoā is done. You know, it can vary tremendously. We need to address those sorts of issues. So again, we've got to really understand the role of whāmek, what boundaries does it work within, and really it's our rongoā community to actually give those boundaries, not just be consultants and then they go ahead and do it. No, let the kahui rongoā actually set the boundaries.
Tēnā koe. He whakaro o, Rihanna?
Yeah, I think all of us who ingest anything or participate in anything at any time want a reasonable level of assurance, which is a tough, so let's be clear with when we talk about rongoā, I'm mindful that we all want that personal assurance will be okay. But at the same time, we don't want to go messing around in spaces where we don't belong, because there is tikanga and there are kawa and there are attributes that, you almost feel like you shouldn't question about our own esoteric knowledge and healing, etc. So it's a really, really tough line to measure because, you want someone to be responsible for saying and doing the groundwork around actually, if we put this out to the tini me te mano or to all of our Māoria, then how do we know it's safe? And yes, and I mean, I think we've all got those moments where we go, oh yeah, well, because our nanny did this. Like I remember our nanny used to rub kawa balm, which was like Vicks, on our feet. And I would think to myself, I don't necessarily understand what the logic is here, Nan, because it's not my feet. I can't, it's not my feet that are hurting. It was the marimari that was getting on top of me. But in saying that, now we know lots more as I grow up, and I know lots more about acupuncture and different pressure points and our own knowledge as well, that I can see what the logic was about the relationship to feet to everything else. So I would love to say there is a silver bullet to answer the question here, but I think it's going to be one of the grey spaces, and something we have to be really diligent around as we develop something to try and give us that assurance, but being really mindful that we don't walk that fine line of then cutting into how it stops stuff, because it's the unintended consequence of an assurance document that is really the difficulty here. If we want the assurance, be careful what we ask for, because it may just then lead some of our providers and or our own knowledge bases into arguing a point that says, who are you to tell me what I can and can't do, can and can't make, can and can't take? So, he whakara noiho.
Well, tāpiriki then, I think Glennis's follow-up question is relevant to you all. You all have experience in these types of bills and policies, because Glennis asked, when will we see a Rongoā Māori legislative bill to protect traditional Māori healing rights?
Well, I guess I'll go first. Great pātai.
Don't give me a trailer, please.
No trailer here. But we have a legal team that's led by a Māori that understands the work that we need to do here. We have a policy team where there's Māori included in that space to be able to help us. We've also got a working group that overlaps that to be able to figure out what this looks like. We don't have all the answers. We know what we want. It's all about the how. How do we do it, and how do we land this so that it's tika and pono and there's aroha throughout the whole process, and that it's something that it resonates with Māori. These are all the big challenges. We all agree that this is something that is a good thing, and it's something that we should pursue and work towards. It's just a really it's all about what it is and how do we articulate that, and how do we make sure that things land in the appropriate areas. So I don't have a timeline for this, but I know that it needs to happen, and we are talking to the right people. What we do need to do, though, is stop saying what it's not and start giving us the advice of what it should be. And that's something that we just need to really start leaning towards, is really that solution-focused approach of helping us land this. Yeah. So I guess that's my initial kōrero and thoughts.
And you were speaking to quarters. So generally, once you have this process of having the rōpū that you just described, that does mean it's in a pipeline, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely, it's in the pipeline. But in regards to what is it, because as I mentioned before, MB is the main advisor to our ACC Minister in Parliament. What is it that we're advising them to change so that things are better for Māori? What is that advice? We know what it shouldn't be, what it isn't, but we need to be really clear on some solutions to make that happen. And that's something that I'm reaching out to the Rongoā community. We are looking at renewing a Rongoā advisory panel as well to give us a steer in that, and that's going out to market this month as well. And so hopefully we can get that whakaaro, bring that in, be brave and bold, and just give it a go. The other thing I'll probably highlight, and it's sort of an approach that I really resonate with, if there's a pathway and there's two ways to go about, and you don't know which way to choose, what I always suggest is go down a path, and if you've hit a dead end, for surety that that's not a good path. You turn around, you go back, and you go down that other path. And so that's kind of what we need to do as well, because if we just stand there at a crossroads and not do anything, then it leans back to one of the big concerns that Māori have had with ACC is there's a lot of talk, but no action and no change. So that's just something else that we're looking to bring in. We're not going to make everyone happy. And in fact, I'll probably have another plug. I'll be honest and say sometimes we do deal with Goldilockses. The porridge is too hot, so you heat it up. So you cool it down, the porridge is too cold. You just can never get that balance. But, this is the world that we work in. And again, we're resilient. We know that this is something good, and we're just willing to just, in partnership, give it a go.
It's called wānanga.
Wānanga.
Rihanna, he kōrero tāpiri au.
Oh, I think, you go.
Well, all I can say is exactly what Alan did. We've got to be bold. We've got to be brave. We've got to actually means taking risks. But I'm not much into the legislation, but I will say that I'm amazed at how many very capable legal people there are, lawyers and the likes, Māori, non-Māori, who are capable of doing this. And to actually remind them always that Te Awa Tupua legislation, the Tūhoi Ledge, pointed New Zealand's law in a different direction. We know the hokapapa of our legal system. It came imported from Great Britain, but we are now beginning to actually develop one which is specific to Aotearoa and to the South Pacific. And so really, just to encourage those special people that you've got in your team, Eldon, to be bold, to be brave, and remember that we're in this southern hemisphere.
Kia ora pā.
Tēnā koe. Rihanna, kare kore he kōrero au. Hei whakakapi, because we just have a couple of minutes left, but just to let people know that there are links in the live Q&A for Te Waiwaka, for some of the questions that you've asked for links to. But when we speak to this and when we look at such a bill, Rihanna, I know that you've got quite a lot of mahi to do as it is. Engari kare kore he whakaaro o e pāna ki tērā ara.
Ai tika. And of course, as Pa and Eldon have alluded to, it's something we're all going to have to get busy with, because going back to my original kōrero, people want assurances that anything we do, irrespective of the longevity of the whakapapa of that esoteric knowledge, if just one person gets sick or just one person has an adverse event, then we're all going to know about it. And that will drive a wedge into our, into our whole kaupapa. And so I think we've got to make sure that whilst we're really reasonable about the fact that it's not to try, it's the unintended consequences to be careful about. Whenever we write a document, there is always going to be an unintended consequence. So try and be as mindful as we can. We have to try and, and really, as I said before, sit and that noho tatapu state to make sure that we can kind of see all the things that might be impacting. There's something about being in the dark that you get the most clarity, and then making sure that as we go forward that we actually do get really vocal about these opportunities, that we do submit all of our whakaaro, and that we help to write the very document that we think might just get us across the line for that, so that we can all, move forward in this space. I think the Māori Health Authority's intention is to give rise to our rongoā knowledge as being one of those purposeful, useful tools across the wellbeing spectrum. And again, to promote well-being, we think that some other things have to be lined up to make sure that we can create well-being, like decent housing to live in, access to our own esoteric knowledge, readily, easily, courage, all of those other things we have to put in place to get our people into a state of well-being. But meanwhile, making sure that as these documents form up, that we all get, really demonstrated about it. Give our feedback, make sure that for all of our people who are online here, you are the experts in these spaces. It's not for Rihanna to say what will or won't make the grade, for instance. It's for all of us collectively to put our knowledge together. That, the collective activity of our people has always been our strength. Whenever I've seen anything good come to our people, whether it was the fights for our whenua, whether it was our bastion point moments, or whether it was our reo, the struggle for our reo to be brought back into the light, it doesn't matter what it is, it was always a collective activity. It's where our strength happens. And I don't know for anyone else, but if you've been and watched whenua on the weekend, and Stacey, I saw you at Lion King over in Manukau there. We all went to Cinema 7 when we should have been in Cinema 1.
Aye.
Yeah, that's right. But those are the moments of hope and aspiration that shine for me. Sitting there, listening to our babies laugh at the reo of an animated cartoon that was there. I don't know. My boys watched it when they were babies in Te Reo Pākehā. But to see these moments come where we know things are lifting and shifting, we can, we've just had matariki on a national level be celebrated. Even though people accuse it of being something we've made up recently, in spite of all these treacherous moments where Whiro is throwing all of his tools and instruments and ngangara at us, we rise. And we rise collectively to meet that thing. And again, having watched whenua, I'm reminded once again that sometimes you just got to take the proverbial by the horns and get moving whānau, and that's where we're at. So that's probably a great way to finish on that note.
Tēnā koe ko tēnei te atapō, haha tā tātou I te atapō ka tuku karakia. We engage pre-dawn in our intentions, our hopes, and our path that we set forward. Katahi ka awatea. The awatea is coming. And so thank you all for this beautiful session. Well, wonderfully designed, I'd have to say. Koutou katoa ngā kai kōrero, tino rangatira ngā kōrero I ātararanga hia e koutou. No reira, e kore e mimiti ngā mihi, ka tukuna te rākau kōrero o te rā, ki o te rākau waiata me ki aku ruahine, ki oku kuia tēnā rākau tō katoa. Mo tēnei wā.
Te kua kia haere noa ngā puki mana e hotu nei e tangi nei te manawa
tuna tēnei kia kaurua toko toru. I roto rai ngā kororo katoa i whāoro i te. E tino mihi tuna tēnei kia koutou. Tautu kia koe Stacey, ko koe te kai arahi a tātou te rānei. Anō reira tēnā koutou. Taki uru, hau hau te toki Māori ana, ko te toki Māori, nā ko te rei. Tawhito ana te uru rei, nā ko wai, ko te tūma, te hau te rei. Pipi wai ana, ko te morehu. He koro whiti, he koro whata, ka tū ki runga ko te manu rei e. Tai parikia.